Move to approve.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, on the consent agenda, I have some people that are on the coaching list that came in after the agenda. So I'm going to read their names, and then we'll go back and get to approval. Rhonda Ross, Central Magnet Volleyball. Carson Perry, Oakland High School Swimming. Santel Perry, okay, Oakland High School Swimming. Collier Smith, Central Magnet School Tennis. Cameron Cross, William Buchanan Middle School Volleyball. Maureen Gray, Blackman High School Volleyball. Jeff Shipley, Stewart's Creek Middle School Softball. Octavius Mathers, Stewart's Creek High School Football. Ryan Jordan, Smyrna High School Football. Malachi Thomas Reynolds, Laverne Middle School Football. And Stephen Peden, Central or Christiana Middle School Football. Okay. Approval of the consent agenda. Do we have a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, let's move on over here to visitors. Okay, visitors. I have a few people here. We dedicate 30 minutes of the first of the meeting to visitors. 3 minutes apiece. First one will be Al Evans. Come up to the podium, state your name, address, and you got 3 minutes.
Okay. My name's Al Evans. I'm a retired teacher here from Rutherford County. Taught physical science, and I did track and field and cross country. I was asked to be here tonight to speak to you about Laverne High School's track and field, their facility, and also I want to kind of put some perspective to it. I've got some faces up here, so you have some recognition of individuals that have been part of our program. Real quickly, second to the left there, his name is Dr. Quincy Banks. He just graduated from medical school from Wake Forest. And if you look over here to the fifth from the left, that's Alex Young, with lots of medals around his neck. He just competed in the World Games in 2017. He was a USATF national champion in the hammer throw. In case you don't know what that is, that's where you turn in a circle with a tethered ball, weighs 16 pounds, throw it about 300 feet, and you grunt real loud. So it gives you an idea. If you go to the next picture here, this face right here, you probably don't recognize it too much from the past, but that's your new principal over at Laverne High School. That's Theowana Hatchett. Okay? She threw the shot put for our program, so you can see we've made some leaps and bounds, and this is really good. Go to the next picture, please. LeBron Anderson, one of my fine distance runners, and I think has done a very excellent job for our program at Laverne High School. He is an Army recruiter here in this local area. If you go ahead. This is Martin Capistron, and Martin Capistron was basically a couch potato, but ended up being my top runner, and is an engineer, and also went to the military. Next picture. And this is Cody Murphy. You don't Murphy. Cody Murphy, you don't recognize him in this picture, but he's your Channel 4 weather meteorologist. So if you see him on the news, you'll know who it is. The reason why I'm here tonight is because the track facility at Laverne High School is one in which it had to be basically construed or made up to work as a track and field program. The track facility has 7 lanes instead of 8. And because of that, we had to go ahead and change the lane requirements. It still fits within the Federation program. Each lane is 40 inches wide instead of 42 inches wide. And so because of that, our track facility there, or the track facility there, is a little bit different, and it cannot hold an 8-lane meet. However, it can and does follow regular federation rules and regulations for a track meet. So yes, you can do that. And that was the reason I was called here tonight to kind of speak about that. You can make 8 lanes, but you're going to have to do a lot of work to kind of get around that. But yes, you can hold a regulation track meet at that facility. And it's good to see one of my former track athletes now in charge of that. Any questions that you have?
I'd just like to follow up. I know I've known Al for 28 years, maybe longer than that. I've competed against his teams, Laverne. I think the track was put down in 1988.
It was the asphalt facility put in 88. Gary Seymour, who was a drafting teacher at Laverne High School, helped me in the soaking rain and everything lay that thing out, and we had the first facility when they closed down the facility at MTSU. So everybody had to come to Laverne. But the good thing about it was the school board and the rest of this county came along at the right time and rubberized a lot of tracks and put out football fields, and you can tell the difference in our football programs because of what track and field has added to that. Coach Creasy over at Oakland, Coach Crawford, all the coaches that I've worked with have been excellent coaches to work with our program because this sport contributes to all other sports, and it's hand in hand. It proves it in college too. You ask the SEC coaches.
I appreciate you talking about that. Also, I reached out to your former thrower, who happens to be the principal of Laverne High School, and just like every principal here will attest that has a track, that's used by physical education classes, that's used by our CDC classes, it's the community uses it also. So I applaud you because I know when back in the days, you guys got it started in terms of the competitiveness, and I think some of the lives that you've changed is dramatic. I mean,
well, it's good to hear when you hear somebody that's whether he's a world-class athlete, whether he's a doctor, whether he's a recruiter for the military, whether he is an engineer, whatever it is, that's what the rewards are. And you don't see that until you get pretty old. Even a principal that wrestled a bear is in this room right now. So, one of the first students I ever met was Steve Luker. He handed me a fishing rod and said, "Hey, let's go fishing at football camp." So that's the lasting memory that I have for being here so long, I guess, and seeing all the familiar faces. And I appreciate it, what you've done and other coaches have done for me. It's a friendship that it lasts for a lifetime. So I appreciate letting me have your time.
thank you.
All right, thank you.
Devin. Okay, next will be Dr. Michael Hatcher.
If you don't mind, I'm going to take this down so I don't fog up my glasses. I'm Dr. Michael Hatcher. I'm live in Smyrna on West North Creek Road at 443. I was asked, after emailing Ms. Johnson earlier this week, I was asked to come down and share my views. I'm a veterinarian here in Rutherford County. I own a practice in Smyrna. Veterinarians have unique education compared to other medical personnel. We're trained in epidemiology. There is a joke in veterinary medicine that real doctors treat more than one species. And, there's a lot of things in front of this board tonight as far as how we proceed in the coming year. I'm here to tell you as a veterinarian, as a healthcare provider for pets, we study transmission of illness from people to pets, from pets to pets, back and forth. This virus is a very scary thing for a lot of people. But I'm here to ask that you guys consider sending our kids back to their regular plan, back to class. My concern is less for the virus. The virus, I'm not here to diminish its impacts on families and what it can do, but it's a temporary illness. It's temporary for those that get it. It can be permanent for some. But the experiences we have in track, where'd he go? You left. The experiences we have in track, the things that you just heard about the track program at Laverne High School, those experiences are they'll be missed if we don't get our kids back in class. I'm more worried about the social development of our children. As an employer, that's important. How do our children get along with other people? I'm worried about way more developmental issues and behavior issues if we don't get them back in class. I know I'm a parent of 4 boys. One graduated a few years ago as MTSU. The other 3 are still in Stewart's Creek schools. And that's been a challenge for them not to be back at school. I'm also head of Smyrna Christian School, mission of Smyrna Church of Christ. We had to close down, and we saw behavior changes in our children within 4 weeks. Students from 2 to 4 or 5 years old. 4 weeks. We saw behavior changes, and we saw personality changes in a very, very short time of them not being with their peers. So that is my greatest concern. I'm very well aware of the virus. It's my day in and out every day with the pets that I deal with and my training and background from veterinary school. So that's what I'm here to say. If there's any questions or anything, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thank you, Doctor.
All right, thank you.
Next is Lee. Is it Doughtie? Okay.
Yes, my name is Lee Dowdy, and I live at 4001 Ashley Drive here in Murfreesboro. And I'm coming to you as a parent of a high school senior here in Rutherford County and begging you to fully open Rutherford County schools and allow our children to attend this school year without any restrictions and to fully participate in schools' sports activities. We have some very smart people in this country telling us that we are in a pandemic, and if we don't follow the rules and guidelines, that people will die and it'll get worse. We have a board of doctors in Tennessee, one being Dr. Thomas Campbell, a Nashville psychiatrist, advising Governor Lee and recommending a mask mandate. We also have some very smart people in this country telling us that just the opposite, like Senator Dr. Scott Jensen telling us that the coronavirus is another strand of the flu, and like the flu is a respiratory virus. Definition of influenza, the flu is a contagious respiratory illness caused by influenza viruses that affect the nose, throat, and sometimes the lungs. It can cause mild to severe illness and at times can lead to death. In 2017 to 2018, according to the CDC, there were 79,400 deaths from the flu. That is an average of 217 deaths per day. Could you imagine if the news constantly reported that every night? We would never leave our houses. We would be panicked and terrified like we are now. I'm not saying there's not a coronavirus, but I am saying that this is a sensationalized and politicized pandemic, and I'm asking that you not ruin our kids' lives over this. According to Dr. Scott Atlas, Senior Fellow at Stanford University's Hoover Institute and former Chief of Neuroradiology at Stanford University Medical Center, says there is no reason to panic over the new surge of coronavirus cases. He says it doesn't matter how many cases, it matters who gets the cases. The infection mortality rate of people under 70 is 0.04%. That is less than or equal to the seasonal flu. He continues that overwhelmingly majority of new cases are younger and healthier people. The death rates are not going up, and it says that when you get a low risk of people getting the infection, that's how you generate population immunity, herd immunity, and that's a good thing. Years ago, I was watching the news, and a doctor said the best advice she could give parents to build their kids' immunity was to let them go outside, play in the dirt, call them in for lunch, eat a sandwich without washing their hands. In closing, I'm asking that we use our common sense and don't panic because other people are telling us to. Let our children get on with their lives and let Rutherford County lead by example by showing our faith, our resolve, and the strength of people in this community. And by the way, does anybody remember the tuberculosis pandemic of last year? Neither do I. 1.5 million people died, and not one school was closed, nor did we wear masks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dowd.
Yes.
Okay, Emily Ann Williams.
Hi, I want to thank the board for giving me the opportunity to voice my concerns. My name is Emily Williams. I'm a Rutherford County special education teacher, and I'm a parent of 3 children, 2 of whom are in school with IEPs. I wanted to speak this evening because I am very concerned about potentially reopening school in the fall. I realize this is a very difficult decision to make, and I appreciate your hard work in considering all of the options. First, I am concerned about logistics and feasibility, as the current CDC recommendations include isolating after potential COVID-19 exposure. How many times might this happen to teachers and students within the year? If we were already doing online distance learning, we could minimize these disruptions. Temperature checks and health checks are also recommended, but most schools have one school nurse, if that. I just cannot see that being feasible, and many teachers are familiar with a student whose fever spikes after lunch once the Tylenol they were administered at home wears off. The CDC recommends adequate supplies for protection, such as face coverings, sanitizer, tissues, gloves, soap, and disinfectant wipes. I have had trouble locating these items myself during this extended quarantine. How are we to provide enough for all of our schools and students in Rutherford County? I know that online instruction does not reach all students. My oldest child, my stepson, has multiple disabilities and is medically fragile. I realize that students like him are not going to be able to access iReady or Zoom. However, these children are also the most vulnerable during this time. And if I had to choose between my child's learning or his life, that choice is simple for me to make. Last, I feel that teachers are up to the challenge of providing instruction online. We worked very hard during the initial school shutdown, and we now have new platforms, tools, and the experience to implement effective online instruction. Although students are less likely to die from this virus, everyone who works at a school is vulnerable, as is their family. Cases are increasing daily, and we shouldn't just be looking at the data for people aged 0 to 20, as everyone who works in a school is 20 or older. If we are only looking at 0 to 20, we are considering 15% of Tennessee's total COVID cases and 0% of Tennessee's deaths. This doesn't show us the complete picture of this pandemic and how it could affect educators, students, and their families. And please remember that that data we are relying on to determine whether it is safe to open schools is from a time in which students were out of school, practicing social distancing, and wearing masks. Please consider the safety of those in your care as well as those providing that care. Parents who do not work in the school system can choose whether or not to physically send their child to school and can opt for online instruction, but I cannot. I am a teacher. I work in a school. I love my job, my students, and my family. I don't want to have to choose between them. Thank you for your time.
Ms. Williams. Okay. Rebecca Clay. Craig Myers.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. I worked as a newspaper reporter for 25 years and covered a lot of meetings, but I've not covered many meetings where there was a more important decision to be made, and I understand the difficulty of it. By the way, we live at 5727 Roxbury Drive, Blackman. We have a son who's about to be 10 and is going to be in 4th grade at campus school after waiting on the waiting list for several years. Very excited. I'd like to strongly urge you to approve the traditional opening plan as presented tonight. Life is a balance of risk and benefit. Every time we leave the house with our family, there's some level of risk. It could be from a wreck, it can be from some crime, it can be from some disease. I think in this situation, the benefits far outweigh the risk. I don't want to throw a lot of stats at you, but I had a few that I think put this in context. This is from the CDC. In the age 5 to 17 age group, the cumulative rate of COVID-19 infection, confirmed cases out of 100,000 for that age group is 4. Sorry, I'm having a hard time talking with this thing, but of those confirmed cases under the age of 18, the majority had mild symptoms, and less than 1% it proved fatal. There's been almost no cases of confirmed child to adult transmission of COVID. I think a couple other points I wanted to make. Our children are already isolated and separated from the elderly and the vulnerable. They can continue to do this, but also have the benefit of going back to school. Last spring, I'll give our school system an A for effort, but the Zoom sessions were not effective, not for the younger grades. I think, unfortunately, in our society, children depend more and more on our schools for a number of vital services, not just education, for meals, for screening for problems like abuse, learning disabilities, speech, language, and hearing issues. My wife is a speech pathologist, and even child care. The burden on families to not only find child care, but to be teachers, I think, is unrealistic and unsustainable. I think this decision just involves weighing risk and benefits. And as I said, the benefits to our children far outweigh the risk. The American Academy of Pediatrics issued a report, a letter. I'd like to read from that. The AAP strongly advocates that all policy considerations for the coming school year should start with the goal of having students physically present in school. Thank you.
Mr. Myers. Okay, Matt Rowe.
My name is Matt Rowe. I live on Fulton Court in Smyrna, Tennessee, 37167. I'm a county employee for the sheriff's office. I come up here to urge either one decision of the three. Don't do this hybrid model, because that's not fair to the parents who have to worry about how they're going to take care of some kids who are at school at Sundays and when others are going to be at home. My wife passed away in March during the middle of this COVID stuff, and my kids want to return to normalcy. Most of our parents want to return to normalcy. So I urge us to either do one or the other. Throw out this hybrid model, because that is just, for single parents, how are they supposed to work? And not only for the sheriff's office, I work in the schools. And I can speak to you right now, at my school, there are kids who we are fearful for their safety at home. We're fearful for their education that they're getting because we know their parents aren't teaching them, because at my school, only a few parents came to get the packets. And not only that, there's the safety of not having consistent meals, the safety of being able to know that they're in a safe place. And that hybrid model is just going to confuse those kids even more, let alone the stress it puts on the parents. If you have a kid in a middle school, a kid in a high school, and a kid in elementary school, what are they going to do? I mean, how many of the board members up here have kids or grandkids in the school that have a single parent to raise those kids? Have they expressed their concerns to you? I hope they have. And folks, think about the parents and think about your staff, like the teachers who have kids in their school. How are they going to teach their kids at home if we do this hybrid model when they're going to be teaching the other kids in the schools? So I just beg you to throw out the hybrid model completely, because it's not fair to the parents, the teachers, or the kids. Okay? And I wouldn't be up here wasting my time if my phone calls to my representative had been answered or returned. And it's not one who's up for re-election. So I just want that to be said. Thank you.
Mr. Rollins left a voicemail. Called me back and didn't do it. Peyton Miller.
Hi, I'm a teacher at Rock Springs Middle School, and I am speaking on behalf of a friend and colleague who cannot be here this evening. Esteemed members of the board and valued members of the community, I appreciate your time and respect that the board has a difficult decision to make tonight. However, I feel obligated to express my concerns as an educator when it comes to this fall semester. I knew from a young age that I wanted to be a teacher, and education continues to be my life's passion. I love working with young people, particularly middle school students, even if many people find this unfathomable. Nothing brings me more joy than having the opportunity to watch my students struggle with, learn, and understand a new concept. Our abrupt closure in March left me and my colleagues feeling rather empty, particularly when we realized we would not get to finish this year with our students. Not having the opportunity to say goodbye to our students was heartbreaking. I know I speak for all educators when I say that we just want the opportunity to be teachers again in the traditional sense. However, at this present time, with coronavirus cases increasing by roughly 80% in just the past few weeks, I know I also echo the sentiments of many teachers in saying that I do not feel comfortable returning to the classroom like normal. There is nothing normal about these times we are living in. I recognize that the push to reopen and return to normalcy has been spurred somewhat by quarantine fatigue. However, I also understand that it has been driven largely by a desire to return to the economic status quo, to ensure that we continue business as usual rather than protect American citizens. This in turn has directly affected our schools, and many parents are pushing for schools to reopen because they have jobs and cannot afford childcare or do not feel comfortable leaving their children at home. And I understand and recognize that this is that not having students in school will be a burden on all parents and all people. But I also recognize that having school return to normal while a deadly virus is still infecting thousands of people daily puts our students and our teachers at risk. Yes, the rate of transmission is lower among children up to a certain age, and yes, children are less likely to die from COVID-19. However, schools cannot function if there are only students in the buildings. Having adults in schools is obviously essential. What is being asked of teachers is not only for us to go back to doing our jobs and likely double the work if we are offered both remote and in-person learning opportunities, but also to shoulder an anxiety that we might be the next person to test positive for coronavirus. I therefore implore the board to consider voting in favor of a remote learning option until at least Labor Day so that we can have a better understanding of where we are with the pandemic before sending students and teachers into a potentially dangerous situation. In New York City, 63 teachers and school employees died before schools were shut down in March, perhaps a seemingly small number, but when given the context of how many deaths that is in a profession, it is a frightening number. So there are many things for me to say, but to wrap up, I ask, what would you do when teachers are dying in those classrooms? How are you going to support the students and their mental health when they experience their teacher's death and their classmates' deaths? I think this is something to take very seriously, and I ask that you support our students and teachers. Thank you.
All right, we got one more. Jennifer Carter.
Hello, members of the board. My name is Jennifer Carter. I have a sophomore, rising sophomore at Central Magnet this fall. I live on Chartwell Court, and I just wanted to come and address you today. I'm not envious of your job. You have a job where most of the decisions you make irritate or annoy or disapprove with half of the people that you represent. So I know that it's not an easy decision to make. I'm not going to sit here and spout a lot of facts to you or statistics because I think there's a lot of people that are a whole lot better equipped to do that. I think and I trust that your medical information, your statistics that you're getting from doctors, from immunologists, from epidemiologists, and people that are able to provide you that information. As I said, my son goes to Central Magnet. I believe that's one of the most premier schools in the state, if not the country. I mean, I am extremely proud to have a student there. And I want him to be in the classroom. I want him to get the education that he gets from being in the classroom there. But at what cost? So instead of giving you a lot of facts, I want to ask a lot of questions, because the only questions that we regret are the questions that we don't ask. I just want to make sure that these are the kinds of things that you're thinking about. I want to know if kids are going to be required to wear masks in the classroom. We're supposed to be doing this hashtag Rutherford Responsible now. We're supposed to be wearing masks out in public. If you send children to school without masks on, where they're right on top of each other, how is that going to work? Is the county prepared to go online only? Let's face it, I know we weren't prepared in March, but that was not a plan. I hope that over the summer a plan has been prepared, because if the plan is to do what we did in March, that is not a plan. What about the substitute teacher service? Are they prepared for multiple 14-day absences when you're exposed to COVID and you have to be tested? I was recently tested, thank God I was negative, but I had to wait 9 days for my test result. And if I didn't have my test result back, I was going to have to wait until it came back. 14 days, 21 days, how long would that have been? Schools are already at capacity for their size. How can we possibly accommodate 6-foot social distancing in them? I love Central. You can't do 6 inches of social distancing in the hallway. They're already saying that in states, contact tracing is not working. It can't be done. There are too many positive cases. How are we going to know what children have been exposed? What about the attendance policy where they have to take exams at 8 days? I want to know that these questions are being thought about, because as a parent, these are the things that are very real to me. Thank you.
Ms. Carr. All right, let's go on to recognitions.
All right, Dr. Sullivan's going to come up and introduce the RTIB recognitions for the schools.
Thank you, Mr. Spurlock and school board. So when we talk about RTIB, that really has multiple names that have been around for quite a long time. It is just probably the last 5 or 6 years, we've started calling it response to intervention behavior. It is also known as multi-tiered systems of support. It can be known as PBS, positive behavior support, or positive behavior intervention and support. So we've had this kind of framework for quite a long time. This also fits in with Tennessee's version of Best for All, and then fits in with the federal requirements under Title IV of Safe and Healthy. And so when we think about our RTI framework, that is where it comes from. On a personal level, I've had the experience of implementing RTIB at 2 schools. One school was, quite frankly, an unsafe school as designated by No Child Left Behind when our team got there, and by using part of RTIB, we were able to change that into a school that was truly known for its academic and its environment performance in a different county. Then in opening Rocky Fork Middle School, we were able to implement that framework to really help set the culture of that school. When we think about RTIB, I do want to make sure that we realize it's not a program, and it's a framework, and that is where we struggle with some of our schools with RTIB, and we're going to recognize some of our schools that are succeeding here in just a minute. When we think about response to intervention and behavior, it is very much connected to our response to intervention academic realm, and it is focused on having common expectations, teaching those common expectations, and then helping to develop that intrinsic self-control and motivation for students. Where we lose some of that is when we get focused on the kind of a token economy or a reward system, which in both of my experiences did not work very well. And so instead, it's really focused on developing that individual kid and helping them learn self-control. We were lucky enough last year to, with our Title IV money from the federal government with Safe and Healthy, to be able to begin having a behavior support specialist, not a behavior specialist, but a behavior support specialist. This board approved, and her name is Pam Parker, a former director of special education for Cannon County, and she has been with us for the last 3 years in the county, and it's my pleasure to introduce her, and she's going to introduce our schools. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan, and thank you so much for this opportunity to recognize 4 of our schools this year for their accomplishments with their RTI-2B systems. Glad to be able to interject a little bit of a celebration in what is obviously a very difficult meeting for you. I don't envy you guys tonight. Just a little bit of information in addition to what Dr. Sullivan shared with you. Currently, 30 of our elementary and middle schools are implementing RTI-2B, and as he mentioned, that's Tennessee's version of SWPBS, you might hear it called, or PBIS. Although we do have many schools implementing, we have 4 school teams who, led by their administrators, took it upon themselves to collect and submit the needed documentation and evidence to apply for some special recognition. through the Tennessee Behavior Supports Project at Vanderbilt University. And they are our partners who provide all of our state-supported training and consultation for RTI-2B for our region. These 4 schools were recognized at the State Partners in Education Conference earlier this year, but I'm happy that you guys are recognizing them tonight, so thank you. In addition, 2 of these 4 schools were also distinguished as Model of Demonstration schools, which means that they are demonstrating exemplary Tier 1 practices and can serve as mentors to other schools in Tennessee. So I'm very excited to celebrate them tonight. So principals and your designees, if you will please stand as I announce you. Our schools of recognition are Walter Hill, represented by Interim Principal Laura Heath and the lead of their RTI-2B team, Shelley Brown, and Roy Waldron Elementary, represented by their principal, Tiffany Dukes. And then the schools who were chosen to serve as Model of Demonstration schools are Smyrna Primary, represented by Principal Felicia James, and Assistant Principal Angeline Hale, and Rocky Fork Middle School, represented by Principal Jennifer Clark and Assistant Principal Alan Davis. Please join me in celebrating their accomplishments. Thank you again. Do you have any additional questions for me? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, ready for number 8?
All right, before we get started, I'd like to thank all the teachers, administrators, the staff of all the schools. I know the speaker said earlier, March 13th was a day that I don't think any of us will forget. We weren't prepared. I don't think we anticipated anything like that. However, it did, they say that stuff like that is a good teacher. We're all better now than what we were prepared for in March 13th. But even then, some of the sacrifices of our teachers and administrators goes beyond imaginable. Immediately after the virus hit and we closed schools down, we maintained a dialogue with our principals 3 times a week. We talked about what was going on. We talked about engaging their faculty, engaging their students, and we received feedback from them. So I applaud them for being attentive and taking a lead on some of the things. We were even able to have graduations. I had personally had the opportunity to attend just about every one of the graduations. I was very impressed with how they were able to abide to the CDC guidelines and give the students something that they probably would never have, with this shutting down like we were. So kudos to you guys. It's a difficult task. It's challenging. I have to say, in all transparency, I have children that work in the system. I have an older grandson that attends school in the system. So I feel your pain, and I'm actually someone who would perhaps fall under that underlying conditions. I have high blood pressure, take medication for it, and I'm a little shy of 60. So I've got a chance there. So I'm not making light of that. It is real, and things of that nature. And my whole purpose along the way was to keep our people, our staff, informed. I will tell you, there was a survey that was done by the state of Tennessee under the COVID conditions. Rutherford County schools came back with almost an 85% favorability in terms of keeping people informed, our staffs, our schools. Now, I'll go back a few years ago during the testing debacle, and it was crickets. And I'm not being critical, I'm just being a realist and providing the information the way it is. I won't go into any more, but I want to introduce a fantastic staff, a committee that has been part of these decisions, that will continue to be part of these decisions. Whatever plan is approved tonight, there are protocols that go with those plans. We have worked on those. We started back in May, and we have worked continuously. These people have done a lot of heavy lifting, and you will hear from them. First of all, Dr. James Sullivan, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum Instruction. You've already heard him speak. Dr. Andrea Anthony, Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources. You will hear her speak. Mr. Trey Lee, Assistant Superintendent of Engineering and Construction, you will hear him speak. Mr. Doug Bolgery, Assistant Superintendent of Budget and Finance, is out of town, will not be able to be here. Mr. Jason Everett, the Supervisor or Director of Transportation. Mr. David Krim, Safety Director. Ms. Kate Kozlowski, Special Ed Coordinator. Ms. Sarah Winters, Health and Homebound Service Supervisor. Ms. Sarah Page, Staff Attorney. Mr. James Evans, our Public Information Officer. Dr. Kay Martin, our High School Coordinator. Mrs. Barbara Powers, our Middle School Coordinator. Mrs. Ann Haley, our Elementary Coordinator. Mr. Kevin Whittington, our Assessment and Accountability Coordinator. Ms. Tyra Pilgrim, our CTE Coordinator. Mr. Brian Lewis, our CTE Specialist. He's out of town also. Ms. Judy Goodwin, Principal of Barfield Elementary. Dr. LaTony Murray, Principal of Stewart's Creek Middle School. And Dr. Lisa Justice, Principal of Blackman High School. These people put in a lot of time, provide a lot of input, and have a lot of experience. One of the things we do know, and I think it's been mentioned here it's quite evident, that what occurs in an elementary school is totally different from a middle school, which is totally different from a high school. And we know that one size doesn't fit all. So I say that there's a lot of experience that has been gone into this. I'd also like to point out we have a survey that we sent out to all parents in our system. We had 19,352 response to our survey. Now, obviously, we've got more students than that, but that's a good sample if you're looking at stats. Of this 19,352, the question was asked, will your child return in person to school in August? 59.78% said yes. 6.20% said no. 34.02% said maybe. On the reopening, the question was asked, do you plan to allow your child to ride the bus? 29.14%, which was about 5,641 students represented there, or parents, said yes. No, my child will not ride the bus. 54.23%. That's 10,497 said that. My child will occasionally ride a bus. 16.58%. That's 3,209 people. So we gathered a lot of information there. Now we know since that time, and it has been about, I think, maybe a month. Has it been a month or less that when the survey went out? About a month. Okay, I know things have changed a little bit. Also, we sent out a survey to our teachers, and we listed the three choices. It wasn't just teachers; it was our whole entire staff: teachers, classified, maintenance workers, you name it. Option one was approximately 44.77% traditional, with options for parents. Option two was 25.80%, which is the hybrid. And then option three with fully online environment was 21%. Now that was some of the surveys that we got. We also got some questions, and there were some that were referenced earlier, and we'll be going over those here in a few minutes. But let me explain some things that we've also been going on. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 2 o'clock, I've had online meetings with the Commissioner of Education and Department of Education. One of the things that occurred earlier in June from the State Board of Education, the statement was made that we will have 180 instruction days in schools in Tennessee this year. Now, an instruction day is 6.5 hours. That's the minimum. Rutherford County does what we call a half an hour add-on for our inclement weather days. However, in order to get an ADM and count the kid counted as being present for the day, that's 6.5 hours. There will not be, and this was the statement that was made, and I've got a lot of these questions about waivers. The statement was made by the State Board of Ed. Now, they could always come back and amend this, but there will not be blanket waivers. There'll have to be a good reason. We also heard from our state and local health departments. I would like to get a shout out at this time to Senator Reeves. He opened the doors with the state. They got back to me very quickly, and I do appreciate his help because it was challenging at the time. Now we're going to go over some questions, and I'm going to ask different people from this committee to answer those questions. All right, the first question is, if teachers contract the virus, will they be required to use their sick days or take unpaid leave, or will they be afforded alternative days? We'll start with that one, Dr. Anthony.
Okay. So as you know, Mr. James posted right before April 1st, we have a new Coronavirus Act that went into place April 1st through December 31st of this year. And you may have seen it on the website, and it gives all the rules and procedures. There's 6 different scenarios that it talks about, and then it also talks about the pay that's afforded and what the district pays so that you don't have to use your sick days in those situations. So that's a good reference page for you to look at. So for instance, on this Family First coronavirus response, it talks about how that the employer will pay up to 2 weeks if it qualifies for one of the first 3 reasons. So I'm going to read the first 3 reasons so you can see what would qualify for 2 weeks pay paid by the district, not the employee themselves. The first one is subject to a federal, state, or local quarantine or isolation order related to COVID-19. The second scenario is has been advised by the health care provider to self-quarantine related to COVID-19. And we've had a few of those. The third one is experiencing COVID symptoms and is seeking a medical diagnosis. So in those situations, if that's the order that you're under, then it's 2 weeks pay by the district, basically 80 hours of pay. Now, the second scenario talks about 2/3 of pay for qualifying reasons 4 through 6. And so 4 through 6 talks about, number 4 is caring for an individual who is subject to an order described in item number 1 we talked about, or self-quarantine as described in item 2. Number 5 is caring for his or her child whose school or place of care is closed, or child care provider is unavailable due to COVID-19 related reasons. And the 6th reason is experiencing any other substantially similar conditions specified by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. So the first 3 are 100% covered for up to 2 weeks, and then the last 3 is at a 2/3 rate.
Okay. Great. All right. The next question is for Ms. Kozabowski. Is she here? Okay, you want to come up to the mic here? And since I don't want you to come back, I'll give you 2 different questions here. Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, this says classified employees. Under the hybrid option, how will they be accessible to our SPED students? How do they maintain social distance requirements? And how do they keep masks on SPED students if required?
Okay, so let's start with the first one. The state has provided guidance to our department that IEP teams are going to have to develop a contingency plan. So should there need to be distance learning, the IEP team would come up with an individualized plan to meet that student's individual needs, and the team would have to agree on that plan. As far as, what was the second question? Maintaining social distancing?
Yes.
We know that there are times when an EA might not be able to maintain 6 feet working with students, and that's where we provide protective gear for our staff and our employees for that. And we take those precautions. As far as keeping masks on students, that's going to be something we're going to have to teach to all students, right? It is something to get used to. We're going to have to teach, we're going to have to remind, we're going to have to ask them to put it back on. But at the end of the day, if a student is not able to put a mask on, then it's important that we make sure our staff is protected with their personal protective gear.
I think the last one you probably have already answered, but it referred to requiring your staff to travel. Is that?
So we're going to look at options. We've already started looking at options as to how to limit that as much as possible. But we don't have 50 different OTs, for example, or speech-language pathologists. So there is going to have to be some sort of travel. We are going to use technology tools when appropriate and try to limit that, and we are going to try to cluster groups to limit the amount of schools that they're visiting as much as possible.
You've heard some of our parents talk about medically fragile.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure you, and I know you do, I'm just asking this question so you can say it.
Yes, sir.
You know, we've already gone over those.
Yes, if there's a medical need, as far as an exception that needs to be made or an accommodation that needs to be made, we're going to ask parents to provide that medical documentation for the IEP team to consider. Because again, those contingency plans, and even for when we're back in school with these safety concerns, we're going to have to make sure that we have individualized plans to meet our students' needs. Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, this next question is for Dr. Anthony. And I think this was brought up by a speaker earlier, and this deals with substitute teachers' demands.
Yes, so Janet Lee, who we've been working with for several years with Advantage XPO, we stay in constant contact with her weekly, and she's excited to report that she has the majority of her associates returning and several new that they're doing training right now this week with. So they're fully excited and ready to come back to work and are waiting and watching the board meeting tonight so that they can additionally partner with us and help support our return.
All right, this next question is for Mr. Trey Lee, and I think this was brought up also. Will teachers be provided with materials to meet the cleaning needs? Also, I would throw in there those masks, those gloves, those things of that nature. I think that was asked tonight.
Yes, sir. Back in May, we began putting together cleaning protocols, checklists, daily checklists. We're fully aware that when we go back to school, it's going to be virtually impossible for the custodians we have to clean each and every space. So we've basically sent out to the principals a breakdown where the teachers would be part of our daily cleaning. The chemicals that we're looking at, the cleaning agents that we're looking at purchasing are healthy, biodegradable, all these kind of things. We're looking at things that have 4-minute kill times, so that as we'll use middle school and high school as an example, they change classes most of the time on an hourly basis. So, and they give them 6 minutes based on most of the principals I've talked to change class. Well, we all realize that with social distancing, they're going to do some kind of staggered bell change class time. So they would be provided with the tools that they would need to spray down desks, doors, light switches, that sort of thing after each class. 3 to 4 minutes, any virus that could potentially be there is no longer there. So we have provided these protocols to the principals, and we also are providing those needed cleaning agents to the schools as well.
Okay. All right, thank you, Mr. Lee. The next one is for Dr. Sullivan. Will attendance policy be altered to compensate for students who contract the virus? How about multiple student families?
So when we think about attendance, our attendance policy, of course, would be an excused absence if they contract the virus, but we also have that option to where if a student had to be quarantined or had to miss instruction for any amount of time, we would have our distance learning available. So that would be probably a part of our new instruction and our new normal, regardless of what type of scenario we would be in. If we think about instruction, teachers right now update websites, and instead of updating websites, with our Sunday message this past Sunday, we had our KIDM, just a quick overview, and that really kind of takes the place. As far as what the state of Tennessee requires, the state of Tennessee still requires the same attendance policy for every student, irregardless of what platform that we're in.
Okay, next question is for Dr. Anthony and Ms. Page. Either one of you can do this, talk about this. If option 2 or 3 are chosen, will teachers be able to bring their children with them to their classrooms? Does the contract for teachers address this? And will there be any concessions made?
Okay, and we have talked about this, and we would be working, of course, with our staff attorney and our board to determine how feasible that would be at that time. And then our MOU with REA does not discuss that, but any concessions that are needing, we do have several people on the committee as well as our director and board that can help us make those decisions.
Is there anything you want to add? Okay, well, good. All right, Dr. Anthony, again, for medically fragile teachers, will they be compensated by the county long-term disability pay program if they are found to be medically unable to work?
Well, it's the same rule applies that if you're out for 181 days or 6 months, then you become eligible and you would have to provide your medical documentation to that company, and that company would make that determination.
Okay. And the last question for Dr. Sullivan, will our teachers be compensated for increased workload due to possible traditional and virtual responsibilities regardless of the option we choose?
And so when we think about instruction, teaching and learning is constantly evolving. From instruction to strategies to assessment, that's something that continually changes. I argue that it's not necessarily an additional task, but it is something that's in a different focus area. And in talking about that, when we think about instruction, it always begins and ends with the standards. Even if we don't agree with the standards, that is provided to us by the State Board of Education, and it is our duty to make sure that our kids are ready not only at this grade level, but also at the next grade level. We are urging our teachers to continue to plan like normal. When we think about a plan, all teachers are having their weekly lesson plans they create those in Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel, whatever platform you continue to use. And then the only addition is, instead of requiring something different, we would upload those into Kidem so that our parents then have that clear, concise communication tool. If we think about that traditional option with parents having the option to keep their child in a distance learning model, we have a couple options. If we think about Zoom or Microsoft Teams, all teacher devices that we have, or the largest majority of teachers' devices that we have, and we purchased additional ones, have recording capabilities. So a teacher would be very easily able to switch their computer around or their device around so that they could record themselves in a live session if a student was available to do a live session. Or as soon as they're using Zoom, within about 5 minutes of them ending their session, they get a link that says link to your recorded meeting. And that would again be just as simple as our educators currently. We have many of them who update their websites every single day with here's what we covered in case a kid was absent. Again, we're going to have those links on our website, but Kidem kind of takes the place of what that traditional looks like. If we think about what does that look like for an individual teacher, because we want to make sure that our teachers understand their value, they're the heartbeat of our schools. And when we think about that, it really depends on the number of students that are choosing that distance learning at an individual school. We take a 3rd grade, a 7th grade, or an integrated Math 1 classroom. If you have 3 kids that have an entire integrated Math 1 course load that do distance learning, that's probably going to end up falling on whoever those kids are scheduled with. If you end up with 70 students, that gives you, as an administrator and a school building leader, some options to think about with 70 kids. Do I maybe want to schedule 2 teachers who are doing the complete distance learning option? All of that just to say, and we've talked to our administrators, our 6 through 12 administrators, that making sure that our PLC folks at the beginning of the year, we don't have student data without testing last year. And so providing our teachers that extra time to get them used to planning differently instead of just planning additionally.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sullivan. Mr. Everett, could you come to the mic? We know that we move more than half of our students on the bus. We know the buses are very compact. Can you tell me what protocols have y'all already discussed and are going to bring it before the board to implement? I think there's something tonight about that. Could you tell me some of the safety precautions that you guys have come up with and would like to implement?
Yes, sir. We do know social distancing is not possible on a school bus. Neither is eliminating our routes or moving our bell times all over the place. So what we've come up with is a cleaning and a safety protocol, regardless of which plan we go with. And that involves a thorough cleaning. The material that we supply to our drivers, we're going to pass those out next Thursday to be able to spray down the buses with a 10-minute kill time. Correct, Mr. Lee? a 10-minute kill time after the AM runs and after the PM runs. So they'll be cleaned twice daily. The seat behind the driver remain empty at all times. Protect that driver from having someone right behind them, so they'll have a little distance and a little safety. More so. We're also looking at having masks on, requiring masks for our drivers, especially during the loading and unloading period where students are coming by. Driving down the road, we're still working on that because we know those routes will be long, a couple of hours, and we do have an older age group driver. So we're looking at some options with our face mask requiring during the loading and unloading, as well as the disinfectants.
And also, I might add, the students wearing masks on the bus.
Yes, sir, as well, and keeping the windows down to increase ventilation so you don't have that stuffy environment, although it will still be pretty warm. Thank you.
All right, and Ms. Winters, is she here? Would you mind coming up and speaking on the article that has been shared?
So I was asked to review the American Academy of Pediatrics statement that they published on June 25th about students returning to school. And as was referenced by one of our visitors earlier, the Academy does strongly advocate that we consider returning to school in a traditional setting, having students physically present in the school. The importance of in-person learning being well documented, and there's already a lot of evidence regarding the negative impact of children because of the closures that happened this last spring. Being out of school makes it difficult for schools to identify and address learning deficits, any physical or sexual abuse, substance abuse, depression, suicidal ideation. And then this, of course, puts the children at considerable risk. We are asked as policymakers for districts to consider all the evidence that has also been presented that COVID tends to behave differently in children and adolescents than other respiratory viruses like flu. And the flu is what most of our current policies are set on because that's what we've seen in the past, but this is a little different. COVID manifests like other respiratory illnesses, and a lot of the symptoms are similar to those seen in adults, but children are less likely to have fever. Children are less likely to present with fever as their initial symptom, and they may only have gastrointestinal tract symptoms, so they may present in a different manner. There's also a tremendous amount of evidence that indicates that children and adolescents are less likely to be symptomatic and less likely to have severe disease related to adults. So the risks toward the children are not what we might need to think about primarily. The workers are at a greater risk than the children. The bottom line that they state is that children are less likely to become infected and to spread infection, and they wanted to remind that our goal is to mitigate the risk, not eliminate risk. The article does give a description of the main mode of transmission, and it is by droplet from person to person. So for this reason, strategies for infection prevention should center around that form of spread, including the physical distancing, face coverings, hand hygiene. And there is evidence that spacing as close as 3 feet is better than not spacing at all. So if you can't distance 6 feet, 3 feet is better than not. There's also discussion of the transmission of COVID-19 through aerosols, which are smaller particles than the droplets that we're breathing and spreading, and objects, materials, clothes, and things like that. And those are not as likely to spread the virus as the droplets that we're spreading as we speak. But because those are still possible ways of transmitting the virus. The cleaning, the hand washing, the hand hygiene, teaching children not to touch their face, not to do all those things, wear a mask, wash their hands before eating. Those are the biggest, that's where they place the biggest emphasis. They also talk about the policies about screening for temperatures and doing all those COVID question screenings. They're very realistic and say that, you know, that's just on a large scale for a school district the size of ours. It's not feasible to expect a temperature check and running through 5 questions with every student as they come in, but they recommend that perhaps parents do the screening of their children at home, and they kind of raise the bar of don't send your child to school sick, don't send your child to school if they have any of these symptoms. They focus a lot on the practicality of conducting business in this era of COVID, but really stress that they feel like being back in the traditional school setting is best for children.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Dr. Anthony, on the situation that you just discussed about the symptoms and things of that, what's our plan in terms of our schools knowing what the symptoms are and what to do about it? Can you kind of go over that a little bit?
So we have several plans. Our first one is also for our visitors, for which each of the principals have been given the stop sign with the list of symptoms. Do you have a cough? Are you experiencing shortness of breath, etc.? And using that in addition to wearing their face mask as a screener. And then also we have a sample form where the employees can self-monitor daily their temperatures, as well as document that they have a no answer to the COVID question. So for instance, if the first day of school is August the 3rd, then on August 3rd, I would have my template, I would have my name and my work site on it, and I would first look, have you been in close contact with a confirmed case of COVID? Well, my answer would be, hopefully at that time, no. The next one would be temperature. If 104 or greater, stay home, or if you're already at a placement, I know that Kate talked about sometimes they may have to do some traveling, and so they may be checking throughout the day, then you would want to make sure that you leave immediately. Another question is a cough, shortness of breath, or sore throat would be a yes or no question. Fever in the last 48 hours, new loss of taste or smell, vomiting or diarrhea in the last 24 hours, and then initialing off. And so therefore, the principals can check those logs as well, because we do realize the most important thing is when the teachers are there, they need to be with the students and involved and still lining up at the nurse's station. I believe somebody mentioned getting that taken care of. So a quick check daily to make sure that everybody is ready to attend work.
Mr. Lee, I know we're getting some of the thermometers from the state. I think it may be one thermometer for every 40 kids.
Yes,
so
sir.
we'll have the ability to take temperatures. It's not that we can take everyone's temperature.
Correct. Those came in this week, and we'll be distributing those next week to all the schools.
Okay. You know, one of the things to mitigate it, I think we've all read about it, is maintaining that social distance, also, you know, wearing masks and things of that nature. But I've got someone here I want to speak on something, because she is a principal of an elementary school. She's been a principal for probably a few years. And she's also had the opportunity this summer to observe the YMCA at her school. So, Ms. Goodwin, would you mind come up and speak on your processing, how we mitigate the kids moving around in your school?
I'd be glad to do that, but I'm going to take an opportunity right now to thank those folks over there, because some days I'm sure they have felt like they've been beat over the head with meat cleavers. We talked about teachers and staff in schools being heroes, and a lot of people have emerged as heroes during this time. These are unsung heroes. You are an unsung hero, Mr. Director. Mr. Spurlock. okay? Because there is no child saying to you or a parent saying to you, thank you for continuing what you've been doing. And I know as a principal and as a part of this committee, I know that you all have worked so much this summer trying to get the answers that we can't even predict, but you're doing the best you can. You've kept us informed, Mr. Spurlock, and I appreciate that so much. Okay, now to answer the question. This summer, our YMCA returned. They returned with 60 students, and typically we have about 90. I assigned them 5 different places to be in the building, and all the staff were going to wear masks. And they asked me, am I requiring the students to wear masks? And I said yes. I want to dispel the myth that children won't keep a mask on. Now, parents, I want to apologize to you, but I want to thank you at the same time, because we get the best of your kid every day, and we know that. And we know that during this shutdown time, you probably got the very worst of your kids. And I am really sorry, but we do. We get the best. In elementary school, children want to please. They will do their best. They will need to know, however, what is expected. The most unfair thing we can do to any human being is to not let them know what we expect from the very beginning. For example, we will teach the children that the way that it is most likely that COVID-19 will enter your body is through your nose. So a pull-down mask is defeating somewhat the purpose of you protecting yourself. Now, that's something children will need to know. But you can't correct a child for doing something they did not know what was expected. I saw a video, and it was a YMCA nationwide, and they talked about how they taught children about social distancing, and it's the airplane model, and it's simply where you put your arms out. If you can touch somebody, you're too close. If you're wearing a mask, just like Ms. Winter said, you can reduce the amount of space between them. If you're not wearing a mask, you will need to keep the 6 feet, and we can accommodate those things. Also want to say something else. I know as a school principal, I would love it if everybody loved me and every decision I ever made was just to their liking and it worked for their families. But I've been in it long enough to know it ain't happening. Every family is different. Every family member has a different need. And all I can say is we will do the very best we can, and I am committed to that. And all the principals in Rutherford County and the staff will be committed to that. Can we answer questions that will be occurring 2 months from now? No, we can't. But we collect a lot of smart people in education, and when I don't have an answer, I'm going to listen to the smart people. Smart people tell me, wear a mask. It's the responsible thing to do. It is the respectful thing to do. So we're going to be teaching our kids that as well, and we'll work with individual children in their particular situations, and we will do everything to make this work. And if we can't, we will have had the courage to try.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Dr. Murray, are you here? Could you come up to the mic? Dr. Murray is a principal at Stewart's Creek Middle. We know middle school is a little bit different from elementary school. Dr. Murray, can you tell me some of the things that you already talked to your leadership team and your staff about in terms of trying to mitigate the spread of the virus?
Absolutely, and thank you for the opportunity. Already, we've been, and not just at Stewart's Creek Middle School, we have several awesome middle school principals that we share and we collaborate, and we PLC as an admin group all the time with that. Some of the things we've discussed and just trying to mitigate, and I even had to look up that word, that vocabulary. How do we make it less severe? How do we make it safer, number one, for our kids to come so that learning can continue to go on? So we've discussed that we work in many schools, in middle school, so that means we have 5 teachers who are all teaching the same, let's just say 125 students. So we've discussed moving the kids half at a time in the hallway so there's not as many students in the hallway. Several of our middle schools have already
put the arrow signs. You only walk this way in the hallways. You only walk backwards on the other side in this hallway. We've discussed moving the teachers, keeping the kids located in the same classrooms, and the teachers rotate with that. We talked about moving one hallway at a time. So there are several things already going in place. Again, we'd like to thank the leadership as well. This middle school group is excited, and they're problem solvers. They wake up, I know I do. I go to sleep thinking. I get nudged by my wife, I'm rolling over and waking up thinking about that. So we're problem solvers. We're excited about the opportunity. This is an opportunity for all of us to be an example for our kids, and we're excited about that opportunity. So those are some of the things that we're looking at with that.
Thank you, Dr. Murray. Appreciate that. All right, now the next step up is the high school. It is unique, to say the least. However, we've got the principal of one of the largest high schools in here. I think is she still Dr. Justice, you here? You can come up and because you've got a lot on your plate. So if you will share with us some of the things that you and your leadership team have gone over.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, as a member of this committee early on, we started talking about the issues that we would have to mitigate regardless of the option that you guys chose. And so we've taken a look at a lot of those, and I do appreciate that we had a chance right after our first meeting. We had a chance to meet as a high school principal PLC. We took every issue. We combined ideas. This is, the start of it. And then, of course, we all take this back to our schools to figure out, well, what is it that will work in our own individual schools. And I'm not going to lie to you, the traditional return will be very, Dr. Murray called it an opportunity. Okay, I'll keep with that word. It'll be an opportunity at a high school level. If I've got 2,000 students who could potentially come in my building, and I know you said 6% of those said they weren't coming, and 30-some-odd% said maybe. When's that maybe? When are we going to know? And do they have to be there? Is that a semester commitment? Is that a year-long commitment? What is that? Because I can't change a schedule every 3 weeks at a high school level. That needs to be done sooner than later, like yesterday. Because we have a schedule that we've been working on since March. And if I were to have to change it right now to make some, distance learning teachers and some in 3 weeks, I don't know. It would be an opportunity. I will tell you that for a large high school, the areas of most concern to me are the classrooms, if we come back traditionally. Because if I was just going over my schedule before you guys came in, and I've got a classroom with 31 students in it, I'm not going to socially distance unless more than 30% don't come. Lunch is something that I think would be doable, but it would be spread out. Transitions between classes would be, I told Mr. Spurlock the other day that we would have to go to longer transitions within, longer transition periods, and do it in pieces. So where to hold COVID students or teachers if they present at school with symptoms, and who's going to get that job of supervising, because you must. And contact tracing, I can see that being a huge job for probably the principal. That may be all I do for the first semester. The morning holding areas, just the sheer numbers and the way we move 2,000 students 8 times a day, if you consider coming in between classes and leaving, that's a lot of movement. And yeah, so I say all that to tell you that we have thought about a lot of possibilities. I know we can't possibly think of others, but as they come up, we will, we will consider, and we will do the very best we can. But I do say that I think that the traditional method for a high school setting will be very difficult, depending on how many come in. So.
Thank you, Dr. Justice. Appreciate that. Okay, what I'm going to do now is go over the options again, kind of add some things to some things that's been asked, and we'll go from there. First of all, option traditional, return to full on-campus instructional opportunities for students in a traditional format. Modifications to logistical operations as needed, including arrival, dismissal, class changes to help mitigate transmission of the virus. An option will be provided to parents who choose for their child to receive distance learning instructions. Now, one of the questions was brought up, and we've had this discussion. It would be the recommendation of this committee, if the board went to the traditional with the options, that any parent who chooses for their child to go on the distance learning, that would be for a semester. A semester. Now, let us back up a little bit. If a child, while in the school, contracts COVID or has to quarantine, let's just say they have to quarantine because of contact tracing. And by the way, contact tracing is mitigated by keeping the kids in closer proximity. In other words, not going from one sharing, clustering together. In other words, it's almost like a herd. If you're together a lot, you know when someone comes down, you know who's been exposed to it. However, if you're moving every different way, it creates problems. That's where the high school thing comes in, but we do have plans for that. So my point being, if a kid gets COVID and they were on the traditional, and their parents did not choose the distance learning, as soon as the quarantine was over, and by the way, the symptoms, we know they're all over the board. I heard someone say that in children, they don't run a fever. I had a 45-year-old deacon who caught COVID in my church. He didn't have any fever. He had congestion and he had a slight headache. So these symptoms are all over the place. If they quarantine for those days, and for the last 3 days or the 3 consecutive days at the end, they are symptom-free, they can return. And Ms. Winters, am I stating that correctly, wherever you may be? All right, thank you. I was making sure I got that right. All right, so that would be different. That would be different when someone chose to be on it and just up and says, well, I want to come back, or vice versa. Now, when we schedule them, all right, we're scheduling them just like they are. You may have 20 in the class, and you may have 10 on distance learning. So it's not like we're separating them. They're going to be in that same class. We're not moving them off the roll and bringing them on the roll, because keep in mind, 6.5 hours of instruction has to take place, whether it's in person or whether it is on distance learning. So trying to kind of clean that up a little bit. All right, next is the hybrid. We've heard a lot about that hybrid. I think you could, if someone would ask me, what is the intent with the hybrid? It's pretty obvious. We want to reduce the capacity of the building. All right, but in this it says it would include both on-campus learning as well as distance learning. The model will be an alternating schedule for an on-campus and distance learning plans. A proposed A-B schedule will be implemented where some students will be on campus receiving instructions, while at the same time others would receive distance learning instruction. Everyone would receive distance learning instruction on Fridays. Modifications to logistical operations as needed, including arrival, dismissal, class changes to help mitigate the transmission of the virus. And the last one is just pure distance learning. Everyone will receive distance learning instruction. Determination as to when students and staff can transition back on campus for instruction will be made in conjunction with the state and local health departments. Once it is determined okay to return on campus for instruction, the matter will be brought to the Rutherford County School Board for approval. These primarily are three choices. At this time, I would like to ask Dr. Sullivan if you would give us the recommendations from our committee.
So when we think about our committee, just like in society, we don't have a complete 100% consensus. We actually had 13 votes for one and 4 for the other. But based on our collective feedback from our committee, the recommendation was a traditional opening with masks required while on campus and buses with a distance learning option for parents that so choose.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question?
Sure.
We had a question about liability, and this might be a Ms. Page question. I spoke to Senator Reeves earlier today, and he received notice that the General Assembly will take up special session, I believe he said on the 10th, which is a solid date. And from now until then, what are we looking at for our teachers, our contractors who carry our kids?
Absolutely. Every scenario is going to be case by case, as we know. I think we could go on about that for all of these questions. We're going to do what's best for our teachers and students. I want to start by saying I know liability is a large factor, but I also want to say that we are here every day to do the very best for our kids, and we are fortunate in this state to already have the support of our legislator with the presumption that that's what we're doing in our school system. So the Tennessee Governmental Liability Act still is in place. It's been there, it's always been there, and it sets a bar of negligence, which is that we can't do something that we should know is wrong. It is the simplest way to put it. And I have every confidence that our staff and our teachers and our students, as we've trained them up on what is expected, that's the standard that we would hold any day. That legislation, if it does pass, would offer a higher level of protection, especially with so many shifting ideas as science and different articles come out. It's hard to keep up with what's best all the time. But even if that legislation did not pass August 10th, before that and even after, we have a protection in a general way already. Because at the end of the day, like I said, we don't ever want to think about that because we know we're going to be doing the best we can for kids and teachers. But in the case that someone did bring a lawsuit, for whatever motivation, we have the law on our side to protect those taxpayer dollars and to avoid having to overspend on litigation when that money should be going to our educators and to our students. So I feel confident that we'll be able to operate successfully either way that legislation goes.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
If I may, before we make a motion or vote, I would like to make a statement, go over a few things, if I have the floor. Okay, thank you. First of all, I've sat and listened to all of our staff, Director Spurlock, and just thank you all. You've not had an easy summer, no doubt about it, and it's been, we've had so many people reaching out to us as board members saying thank you. We realize what a weighty decision this is for you, but in reality, yes, we get to make the decision. However, you're the ones that have had to lay the groundwork and prepare everything. So thank you very much for all that you've done. Tonight this board is really tasked with making what I believe is the most difficult decision ever in the history of the Rutherford County school system. It's one that I know all of my fellow board members don't take lightly. I realize that whatever decision we make tonight is going to be liked by some and it's going to make others unhappy. There's not a universal win at all in this scenario. As I've reviewed and done my best to respond to the hundreds of emails and calls that I've received, I've tried to keep an open mind when looking at all the different opinions, suggestions, the scenarios, and the struggles that all of our teachers and parents that have reached out have expressed. There are so many groups that have to be considered in this decision. There are, of course, our children. There's our teachers, the parents, the grandparents, and all of the administrators and teachers at our schools. And as I've weighed all of this, I have truly tried to keep all of them in mind. Earlier today, I'm sure maybe a lot of people that are not aware, but earlier today there was a House Freedom Caucus that took place where they had a panel of expert testimony, both from doctors and from educators. And the resounding consensus from that Freedom Caucus was that we need to send our children back to school. So I'd like to share a couple of things that those experts testified to. First of all, they testified that children are definitely at a low risk for contracting COVID and also for carrying it. They also testified that children are always going to perform better with face-to-face instruction. Young children would have to be consistently monitored if online instruction is used. Older children are at much higher risk for emotional issues, depression, and suicide if we continue to keep them in isolation. So I realize that we have a lot of teachers, and I've heard from a lot of them as well, that are very concerned about their health if there's a return to school. And I support anything that we can possibly do to ensure that those teachers are as protected as they possibly can be. Our teachers have to deal with far too many unnecessary stresses as it is. I've had some mention the idea of allowing teachers that are immune compromised perhaps to be our teachers that conduct the virtual classes, while the healthy ones and the ones that want to be in the classroom to return their kids be the ones to teach in the classroom. I realize that could be a logistical nightmare, but it's certainly something that I'm guessing that the committee has already probably talked about. So we also must make sure that we actively provide solutions for our special needs students. This is absolutely paramount. It does sound like, Skibioski, you all have had a lot of conversation and already making those plans, so we appreciate that. I believe that we will likely have enough parents and students that do wind up selecting the online learning that our head count in the classroom will be down significantly. There is a risk in anything that we do these days. We risk our lives every time we get in a car. I, as all of my immediate family members, have gone to work every single day during this time. It's simply what we had to do. Parents have to go to work to support their families, put food on the table, and very few have the luxury or option of staying home with their children. And in a hybrid scenario, these parents are still going to be faced with the what do I do with my children on the days that they're out of school and have to be distance learning. Many cannot afford extra daycare expenses on those days their children are not in the classroom, or even if they can, they still have to go to a daycare or after-school program, which will present no less of the same exposure potential than the challenges of being in school would. Many have said that we should follow the guidelines, so just to the CDC guidelines. There's been a lot of conversation about that. Well, just today, the CDC director, Robert Redfield, said, and I quote, "I'm of the point of view as a public health leader in this nation that having the schools closed is a greater public health threat to the children than having the schools reopen." So thus, having given all of these factors and scenarios presented, my head and heart both tell me that we need to reopen our schools. But also obviously offer the best that we possibly can, and again, that's being done, to provide equitable online learning for those children whose parents do not wish for them to return. So, Mr. Chairman, whenever we're ready for a motion, I'm prepared to make the motion that the board make the decision on option number 1.
Second?
Second that. May I ask, have a moment to share my concerns?
Sure, go right ahead.
I'm going to second that motion, but in the process of doing that, I want to be very clear about how I have arrived at my decision or the decision that I'm weighted with. I've talked to countless parents, hundreds of emails, phone calls. I've been traveling recently. And in sketchy service areas, I've still managed to speak to so many parents, teachers. I have concerns about our children being able to fully work online. I think that as a college student, I did it. I was disciplined and I did it, but I was a non-traditional student. When I spoke to some of the teachers, the high school and middle school teachers that I spoke with, the number of students that voluntarily participated in distant learning concerned me. And I'll admit, I have 4 students, and my children didn't want to do it either. They saw optional, and they didn't participate, even though we urged them to, or at least to the level that I would have liked them to participate. I've talked to the senator, state representative, leaders, medical personnel. I've read everything I could possibly read. I'm plagued. I have sleepless nights. And so this afternoon, my husband asked me, as I'm pacing my room, he says, "What about your kids?" And not one time did I ever stop to think, what about my kids? Because when I make a decision that is going to affect positively every single child as though they were my own. So that's easy for me. Just like in leadership, I would never ask somebody to do something that I myself would not do. I have a child who is medically fragile. My son has been hospitalized twice with pneumonia, had RSV as a baby. So that's a hard decision. So I feel for those families who have medically fragile students, who have medically fragile family members. To say this is a difficult decision would be an understatement. I realize we're not going to make people happy wholly, but I commit to do everything in my power to ensure that the decision that we make now and moving forward, with great follow-up and communication from this wonderful team who's done the great work, to all of our teachers and staff, certified, classified, principals, the whole system. We're blessed to be here. I'll work with them and I'll do everything that I can to ensure that every single child, as though they were my own, is kept safe. So for that, I will second the motion that we go traditional with options for parents to be able to make decisions for their medically fragile children and medically fragile situations to take an alternative education platform. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mask not mentioned in the motion, and should it be or not?
The
committee recommended mask.
committee recommended mask.
We can,
Okay.
we can
Add it to the motion.
articulate that if you, we could write it into the minutes.
Okay. I think it's important to point out one thing here, and we'll have, by the time we open up, if they all come, and they will eventually, they'll be there, somewhere in the neighborhood of 49,000 students. We're just right there. And I would assume all the very smart people in this room, and that's all of them, that things are going to go wrong. They just do. And there are going to be some things, and I think Ms. Goodwin mentioned this, that going to happen probably the first day, but certainly quickly, and continually all through the year that we've never faced before, because we've never faced this before. But I think we can work our way through these things and get to the traditional worked out. And I think that's pretty good. Pretty good. I appreciate the committee and their hard work on this, and I'm aware they're going to continue to work and get us back in school. I think, too, and I need just to mention a couple of things here, just real quick. The hybrid does have a lot of problems connected with it, in that so many people don't have enough computers in their home to do that, particularly if they have more than a child or two, or if they're using the computer. Also, I'm sure there's a child out there that would do what the state says and be on the computer 6.5 hours a day, learning. I have never met that child, and my two daughters would have not have been either of those. But at any rate, and some people, particularly in the Milton, Las Casas area, and in the Eagleville, Rockvale, Rock Springs, Rock Springs, there are areas of this county that do not have access, or it's spotty. And to ask them to go virtual, I think that would be very difficult. The distance learning that is number 3 on this list will not work for a system as a whole. It just is impossible. On the buses and in the classroom, our budget, I don't know, Mr. Director, but our budget would be depleted somewhere around Halloween, which would be an appropriate date, I might add. And we'd be broke long before Christmas. And then we get to go down and meet the county commission and ask them for millions. I don't know what the answer would be, but I suspect I do know what the answer would be. So I think this traditional will work, and I look forward to seeing our youngsters back in school. And I do have a question in a minute, but I won't address it now. We can do it later. But on our athletes and band and things of that nature where, I mean, that's just so important.
It is.
Thank you, Mr.
I'll
Chairman.
follow up with that, Mr. Jordan, you brought up a great point, and we failed to really get into it. On a phone call with Dr. Fiskus with the Department of Health, one of the things that we do know that we will have some outbreaks. But one of the things that, she emphasized, and we've worked on it, is our procedure, our protocol that we go through. It's important. Minimizing the moving back and forth, that helps a lot so that you can contact trace. Wearing the mask is a big part of it. But also, when we look at this whole thing in its totality, is that we don't want to stay on this option forever. And in the motion, it states that when the conditions are appropriate, deemed appropriate in conjunction with the Board of Health, we would bring it back before you guys. And of course, before that time, we would be talking a lot back and forth. I don't know how long this will. It may be the entire year. I don't. I wish I knew. I don't. But it was brought up, and I think it was good on their part that they believed that in March, when we shut everything down, that was the wrong thing to do. Now, that was from the Department of Health. And they believe that if and when we have an outbreak again, shutting the entire system down may be the wrong thing to do. One of the things that I think we got ahead of it early when we talked about differentiation of how we handle these cases, and they brought along the same thing. If you got an outbreak in an elementary school and it just impacts a classroom, you can move that classroom to distance learning. You don't have to close the entire school, or you don't have to put them on distance learning. So I think there's a lot of things. Like I said, the biggest thing that we need from our Board of Education is tell us the plan. We've already started on the protocols, and this is July the 9th. We're training on KIDM. We've run them on our platform. We're getting ready to have some PD opening up here soon this month, but we need to get this information out as quickly as possible so that we can fine-tune it.
Mr. Chairman,
Okay.
if I may. Thank you to y'all, the committee. I know y'all have worked day and night on this, and we greatly appreciate it. I would like to propose to add something to the motion. I agree with Mrs. Johnson and Ms. Moore. One thing that, I know that we're going to talk about this later, and I think, Mr. Spurlock, y'all were right to front load the days and take out the half days, but it's been so long since these students have been in class. So my caveat to that would be to do a transitional week, the first week, let our teachers go all day, let our students go half a day. That half day without students in the classroom will give them time to adjust, clean their room, move it around, or something to that effect. And if we need those days back, then obviously there's fall break. So I think that's some kind of hybrid with that would be.
That's right. We could do that. You're right. We could take those, but we would have to take it from a holiday or something like that. Right. We put that there for that reason, to phase in, if you will, because we do know, I mean, quite frankly, that gives time to, you evaluate what is it you can do better, and you've got the rest of the day to create lessons. So I mean, I have no problem with going back and
I think that would keep our teachers from being there day and night.
because we know that that, you know, on a normal school year, they go to their classrooms early and they set up their rooms and they do a lot of things that they don't get paid for. And I think that just a week of transition of doing that would get our kids maybe a little bit more focused, because I know my son, he would be the last one.
For those of you that don't know, on a student's calendar, they attend school for 180 instructional days. For a teacher, it's 180 days of instruction. It's 5 discretionary days. And on the discretionary days, which she's talking about, we use for PD, we use for parent-teacher conferences in the fall and in the spring, and sometimes we use it for training. But those are 5 days. And then you've got, then you have 10 days of holiday, and then you have 10 days of not PD. I'm drawing a blank here. Help me out here, Mr. Whittington. Use my calendar.
In service.
That's right, in service. Thank you. He's our guy. He's over all this, so he keeps me on my toes. My point being is, if we took all those 5 discretionary days, we would have to make it up somewhere along the line. And I'm not against that at all.
And I understand that, but I think it would give a little bit better transition for our students and for our teachers.
I got a question, or not a question, just a statement, basically. I appreciate you making the motion, Ms. Moore. I agree with you and Ms. Johnson on everything. I just want some clarification on a couple items. I talked to Mr. Lee in regards to supplies. I just want to make sure that we got ample supplies to take care of everything we need, but I know teachers, a lot of times, they spend their own money on supplies. So I would like to see that if that happens, if we run behind or something like that and they do purchase supplies, that they're reimbursed from the system.
Well, I'll be honest, most of y'all are parents or grandparents, and you've been to try and buy things just for your own self. We've encountered some of that as well, and we're buying a whole lot larger volume, so we have a little better access to the distributors, but we have struggled as well. So part of this plan is to supply the teachers with these cleaning agents to mitigate the virus in their classroom, which is the spray bottle. We're providing everything they need. We have pre-ordered so that the schools don't have to. The principals have been getting emails from me on, get ready, this is coming, you're getting 2 pallets of this and a pallet of that. And so we've pre-ordered with the thought process that we think we are in pretty good shape. The fallback to everybody is bleach. And we have also ordered 2 pallets of bleach for every school. It's not our preferred method, but we are trying to prepare, like you're speaking to, of running out of and not being able to get access to certain things. We have changed, and when y'all voted last month for the new supply list that we provided, as part of that was a new policy that said, if the guy who's low bid doesn't have it, I don't have to come back to y'all, I can go to bid number 2. And if he doesn't have it, I can go to bid number 3, and if they don't have it, I can go to bid number 4. I don't have to keep coming back for your approval for certain things. So we've tried to anticipate this, but we don't have a crystal ball either, but we've ordered for the bus drivers. What you're going to vote on here in a few minutes is the new policy for the bus drivers. We've bought the cleaning agents for them, and they are here, and Mr. Everett and his team are going to distribute those to the bus drivers next week. So I say all that, it's a long answer to your question, but we are trying to think about that. We are reaching out for that, and we understand that, and we're doing our dead level best to make sure we don't run out.
Thank you. I've got just 2 more things in regards to the mask. If I understood right, all bus riders are going to wear masks, correct?
That is part of what you're going to see. Yes, sir, that is correct.
And the last thing, as far as all the students wearing masks, I'm just curious, as far as a kindergartner or first grade or some of those, will they keep a mask on?
Yes, sir. We did it as an experiment at Barfield this summer, and I particularly noticed the kindergartners did a great job. Absolutely great job. And I commend the staff. I monitor it regularly to see how tolerant are they. Elementary will try to please you if you let them know what is expected.
Good, thank you.
Go ahead.
In making this decision, what I really struggled with was trying to consider if education was essential. I'm fortunate I own an essential business. I've been operating an essential business through this whole epidemic. And to me, it is. We have to send these kids back to school. They've got to get their education. And I'm glad the surveys turned out the way they did. And I really applaud this group for all the hard work and all the effort you put into putting these surveys together. It just made my decision a lot easier. But at the same time, we got to keep in mind our teachers. They are on the front line. And I had a teacher come into my store today, a Murfreesboro City School teacher. And I asked her, I said, if we go back, I said, are you afraid? And she said, no, I'm not afraid. She said, I'm concerned. I'm not afraid. And so that helped me with my decision. And I'm glad that Ms. Moore and Ms. Johnson has made the motion that they did, because I agree with it. But I still think we got to work on how we make our teachers comfortable coming back to school. And, you know, and them being on the front line, just like our nurses and everything else, these guys deserve, they're going to be expected to do a lot more work. So we need to be looking at how we can reward them for that work. And I would like to see if we can add $3,000 to $5,000 bonus just for the teachers that decide that they want to come back to Rutherford County school system. And I think that's something we need to look at. That's all my comments.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a suggestion or a recommendation at this point that we not add the mask requirement to this specific motion, and I'll explain why. And I'm certainly not a medical doctor, but what I do know from my own personal experience, as well as talking with parents that have children with certain illnesses, for instance, asthma is one of them, that the mask can actually cause as much harm as they do good. And granted, a child with asthma doesn't need to be exposed to COVID, I get that, but they also, especially if the environment is hot in these masks, it's difficult to breathe. And I'm not suggesting that we don't do that, don't misunderstand me. I'm just saying I think it's premature for us to do it tonight. And as a part of this motion, I think it's something that needs to be looked at, because we are going to have to ask ourselves the question of, if we do mandate masks, there's got to be some kind of procedures or something in place that what do we do if a doctor comes or a child comes into school or the parent comes into school with a note from their pediatrician saying the child doesn't need to wear a mask because of a certain health condition. So again, not promoting or saying one way or the other, just saying that it's premature to add that caveat to the decision tonight.
We've actually had this conversation. Ms. Page, you would want to address that?
I think our committee would completely agree with you, Ms. Moore, not necessarily speaking to the motion, that's out of our purview, but whether that's tonight or whenever we want to explore the mask option, obviously our first thought was to not only are some of our children with behavior issues that just might be an impulse, but also to our children who have a disability that would inhibit it, and our staff that might have a disability. So we've explored quite a few options, and we're very fortunate that we already have a strong familiarity in our district with ADA accommodations and modifying our policies. So even if we did it as a blanket policy and we don't even say we're going to allow exception, federal law requires those exceptions. We've talked about requiring medical information from our students and staff so that we can work with them on what's reasonable.
We've explored some of our students, not to take Tyra's glory, because I really think this is CTE's doing a fabulous job here. Our students and our teachers have already started looking into printing the clear shields. So we could use those for students who maybe have a disability where they are impulsively spit, or for teachers who need students to be able to see their mouths because of a disability, or a teacher who can't wear a shield, to give them, or a mask, to give our teachers options. So we have also thought the same exact thing. We know there's going to be people at every level who the mask is just not going to work for them for a multitude of reasons, and we think we can work with each person on what they might need. So I think that's insightful.
Great, thank you so much.
I think it might be a good idea to, Mr. Young, to think about the bonus here in a meeting pretty soon. I think we ought to at least study that and think about it. I also might want to say that educators, and we've got a room full of them here, we've heard all our lives, and it's true, that over the course of the summer, roughly 9 weeks, study habits are misplaced, shall we say, and learning is indeed lost, and concepts are lost. Well, we're about to find out what going from 9 weeks to 19 weeks. We're going to find that out. And I don't think we're going to like the answer. There's no reason why we should. There's going to be some extensive review that's going to have to take place beginning on August 10th. And that troubles me. But I sure agree with what Mr. Young said about we have got to get these children back in an educational environment and get them cranked up and going again. We must do that.
All right. We've got a motion to go with the traditional.
Clarify the motion.
Sure.
Ms. Moore made a motion to go with option 1, I believe, and that was seconded by Ms. Johnson, correct? And there's no we're not adding anything to the motion for masks, correct? There'll be no addition for masks.
I wouldn't add it to the motion that I made, no.
Yeah. And Ms. Sharp had said something about a transitional period for the first week. We're not adding that to the motion either, correct?
If we could take it up on another...
As a separate motion. As a separate motion. So the motion that's on the floor then is Ms. Moore's motion that's been seconded by Ms. Johnson to go with option 1, which is the traditional plan in the agenda, correct?
Yes.
The option for distance learning for those who choose.
Is that correct?
That's
Teachers and students.
Let me read the motion.
Yes.
Okay. Recommend motion to return full on-campus instructional opportunities for students in traditional format for opening schools with an option of parents to choose for their child to receive distance learning instructions. The Rutherford County Board reserves the right to make changes to this plan based on ongoing data about COVID-19.
And Ms. Moore, you confirm that's your motion? Correct. And Ms. Johnson, that's your second? Yes. So you have a motion and a second then.
We got a motion and a second. Ms. Hopkins, would you call a roll?
Mr. Estes?
Yes.
Mr. Hodge?
Yes.
Mr. Jordan?
Yes.
Ms. Moore? Yes. Mr. Young?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson? Yes. Ms. Sharp?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Mr. Chairman, if you would entertain us looking at phase-in days for the traditional model.
Sure.
I don't see an issue with adding those 3 days on there. So if y'all would look at that, where it says Monday, August the 10th, Tuesday, August the 11th, I would add Wednesday, August the 12th, Thursday, August the 13th, and Friday, August the 14th as transitional days where students would attend for 3.5 hours, and the teachers would have the rest of the day to plan, prep, and so forth. Which means that we would return on August the 16th, our first full day. Motion to approve this as stated.
Move.
Second, okay. Any other comments?
I have some questions about
I do too.
Okay.
Being that this is just now being presented to us, and although I don't necessarily disagree, I don't want to make a decision for the teachers if that's not what the teachers want. So can somebody, maybe on the reentry team or Ms. Goodwin, speak to
Okay, I'm thinking also from an administrative point of view, as well laid and well thought out as plans might be. You know, I walked the gym today to see how many students can we put in there in social distance with all these grade levels, okay? While I might have a great plan, it might require us to completely do something different the second day. That's not something you can do just, you know, in a few minutes. It has to be collaboration, really a lot of people involved to make changes like that. And I think those, you know, phase-in days do allow us to adjust and kind of get the lay of the land. You know, what are we needing to make sure in common vocabulary, in the education of our students? Are we saying the same thing throughout the school? And that's going to take people getting together. You know, I'd love it if we just had the ideal plan and we just, you know, went in there with a fell swoop. But I do see us needing to make adjustments, so teachers would need to be involved in that too.
So initially, what was proposed to us was 2 transitional days. And you think that 5 transitional days is more appropriate?
Well, when I think about what teachers would say, taking away an entire fall break, even though they've had lots of time here, I can't speak to that.
I don't know that we would have to take away fall break. What we would have to do is we would have to do our parent-teacher conferences. If the conditions were appropriate to do it, we would have to do that, you know, on our own time. That would be the concession. So we probably need to table this because we would have to, in your conferencing, Dr. Anthony, you would have to bring this, they would have to agree upon this right here. Oh, yeah.
May also be borrowed from the snow days, the weather days?
No, that's a misnomer. We do the extra, you know, half hour, if you will, and and they allow you to use them from inclement weather days, but they don't pay anybody back for it, and they don't let you carry them over for anything else.
Mr. Chairman, with that in mind, let me withdraw my motion and bring it back. Let staff bring it back to the next meeting if they need to.
Okay.
What did he do? He withdrew his motion to do this? Was that your motion?
Mr. Spurlock, he wants.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think we'd have to talk with our REA people and get their feeling, probably do a survey. You know, I do think that we don't have to take away the fall break, but there would be some concessions on doing the 3.5 hours of parent-teacher conferences in the fall and 3.5 hours in the spring on their time, which, you know.
But the teachers would have a full day. It would be the students that wouldn't have the full day.
Right, on these discretionary days, right.
Well, I guess going back to your 2 days you got here, can you get by with 2 days or you need to 5?
Well, we thought we could. You know, I think obviously 2 are good. You know, I think maybe now with knowing, here's where I am with this right now, because I didn't know what you would vote on. Since you've chosen this, I think we would better off now going back to our teachers, because this is, we created the process. Now we need to hear what they need in order to make the process into reality. So I think that would be something we need to bring back. And then we're working with our teachers and administrators now, so that wouldn't be a very difficult task to get that information from them.
I don't recall when our next board meeting is, but it's not in July.
August, is it not? August 11th.
August the 11th? That's one of the days we're talking about.
Could we, I'm just throwing this out there, could we do a special called meeting?
We could. We actually had a meeting scheduled for July 30th that we canceled.
July 30th, is that really, even though we'll have that feedback from the teachers and everything, which is definitely critical, is that really give them enough time to adjust whatever that decision is?
It gives them enough time to adjust. Here's where I'm concerned that you bring that up. It doesn't give the parents enough time to adjust.
Daycare for parents, some parents.
Yeah.
You'd have a whole
Yeah.
week of only
Right,
half days.
absolutely,
You'd have
yeah,
transportation.
yeah. So that's a big concern right there.
Special call zoning appeals meeting on the 21st. We could tack this on so we can move before or after that meeting.
That was just what I was going to suggest and ask if we could do that to avoid having to have another separate meeting.
Is that enough time? Okay. Is that okay with everybody else to tag it on? All right, that's what we'll do then. All right.
Number 9.
Let's move right on here.
All right, number 9, emergency policy for bus cleaning, found on tab 2. This is adoption of policy 3.204. In order to provide authority and clarity to support the recent necessary actions of this board, the following new policy is recommended directly to the board for adoption as emergency policy. Policy 3.204, epidemic emergency cleaning. This policy allows the director of schools to create emergency cleaning procedures for both school staff and bus contractors. Procedures must align with relevant guidance from governmental authorities. Motion to approve and adopt policy 3.204 as an emergency policies, waiving the requirement of the second reading pursuant to board policy 1.600. The policy shall become effective immediately.
Have a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. Any question on that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 10.
We got our 2020 priority list for bus contracts. First priority list, Amanda Lipateri, Rosa Enriquez, Renee Patrick, Marion James, Steve Davis, Kelly Hobbs, Steve Ricketts, Brendan Lane, Christy Crossland, Kim Erb, Tim Graham, Eric Powell, Allison Brown, Cindy Young, Holly Lane, Pam Good, Sally Brown, Bill Estes, James Campbell, Margaret Williams, Lori Thomas, Sue Estes, Wayne Barrett, Brenda Blansett, Doug James, Lisa Adams, Angela Sanders, Greg Estes, Clint Jernigan, Robbie Clements, Tyler Black. Pursuant to the section 3.405 bus contract awarded procedures, the new contractor lists for the 2020-2021 school year are presented. The two lists, the first priority and regular bus drivers who have driven for 2 full years, and the second priority are those who currently own 1 or more contracts, are for approval in order to facilitate the awarding of new bus contracts on the timely basis for the beginning of the new school year and thereafter as contracts are turned into the Transportation Department through the year. Motion to approve the 2 priority lists of bus contracts is effective for the school year 2020-2021.
Have a motion? Thank you. Second? Thank you. Before we vote, these Estises on here are not related to me. I don't even know them. So,
in transparency, I know them. I've known them for about 30 years, but they're good people.
Okay, good. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
All right.
Now,
do I need to read all these items?
No.
Okay, thank you. 2019-2020 waiver tenure recommendation. The following teachers meet the criteria for tenure in accordance with the new tenure law. They hold valid Tennessee teaching license, have served Rutherford County schools for 5 years or 45 months within a 7-year period, and the last 2 in regular, not interim positions. They have demonstrated an overall performance of above expectation or significantly above expectation on the team evaluation during the last 2 consecutive years of the 5-year period, or if held tenure under the previous guidelines and return to Rutherford County schools, meet the 2-year probationary period, and tenure is reactivated. a waiver of Tennessee Code annotated 49-55034, which states that teachers have received evaluations demonstrating an overall performance effectiveness level above expectations or significantly above expectations as provided in evaluation guidelines adopted by the State Board of Education pursuant to Tennessee Code annotated 49-1-302. During the last 2 years of probationary period are eligible for tenure. LEAs granted this waiver may allow teachers who have met all these requirements for tenure eligibility but have not acquired an official evaluation score for the 2019-2020 school year due to COVID-19 school closure to utilize the most recent 2 years of eligibility for the tenure. The 2019-2020 school year will count towards the teacher's 5-year probationary period. Tenure status will become effective the first day of the 2020-21 school year. List here.
Good list, isn't it?
Recommend motion to approve recommendation of the Director of Schools to award tenure and reinstatement of tenure to the teachers who meet the criteria for the 2019-2020 school year as presented.
Have a motion?
Move to approve.
Thank you. Second? Thank you. Questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 12.
All right, 12 is found on special education, found on tab 3, approval of the salary scale for the lead psychologist position. This position was board approved on June the 4th of 2020. The lead psychologist's salary schedule will be a 220-day contract at the supervisor index due to the nature of the leadership role. This position is funded using combinations of school safety grant and funds from the IDA Part B. Motion to approve the lead psychologist's salary schedule to be a 220-day contract at the supervisory index using the funding from combination of the safety school grant and funds through the IDA Part B.
Have a motion?
Move to approve.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 2.
All right, 2 is a contractual agreement with Family and Children's Services. The contract is for the interpretation services for non-English languages provided by FNCS on and as needed basis when interpreters are available either telephonically, through a video, or in person as requested by the client, Rutherford County Schools. This service will cost $65 per hour plus mileage of 50 cents per mile. Billing will include a 1-hour minimum and a 15-minute intervals for in person, 30 minutes minimum for video conference, and 15-minute minimum for phone calls. These services are used for required parent participation during the eligibility and IEP process. Services will be in effect from the date of the approval for this contract until June 30, 2021. Motion to approve the contract for the interpretation services for non-English languages provided by FNCS on as needed basis when the interpreters are available either telephonically, through video, or in person as requested by the client, Rutherford County Schools, at a cost of $65 per hour plus mileage of 50 cents per mile. These services will be paid out of the general purpose special education funds.
Have a motion?
Move.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Curriculum and instruction.
All right, you have a list found on tab 4 of the instruction department requesting permission to offer these courses that you see there for 2020-21 school year under the following guidelines. Board of Education Policy 4.201 states in part, a listing of courses offered for credit in grades 9 through 12 will be approved annually by the board. Recommend motion to approve 2021 course offering list for the Rutherford County High Schools as presented.
Okay. A motion?
Move.
Thank you. I'll second it. Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Can I say?
Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, could I just say thank Ms. Pilgrim and Brian Lewis for the list and everything. They've worked really hard on the CTE program, and that list is quite impressive. So thank you.
2,
All right, professional development, tab 5, Rutherford County School District requires teachers to earn 6 or 12 hours of professional development per year on their own, depending on the approved calendar. Performance Matters provides access to the uses of K-12 professional development and data management. The software product will manage, record, and track professional development for all of our teachers in Rutherford County. Performance Matters will provide ongoing support and maintenance services for the site and products. The contract of $45,500 includes subscription fees for each teacher and totals $45,500 for the 2020-2021 school year. This is the third year of a 3-year agreement. Motion to approve the purchase of Performance Matters for $45,500 for the 2020-21 school year.
Have a motion?
Move to approve.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 3.
All right, this kind of cleans up some of the job description of the instructional coach. Curriculum Instruction Department is requesting to consolidate the instructional technology job description and the RTI coach job descriptions, level 1 and level 2, into one job description, instructional coach. This approval is connected to the Instruction Department's presentation on the 2020-21 school year budget for March. Motion to approve the above or the description of instructional coach.
Have a motion?
Move to approve.
Thank you. Second? Thank you. Questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Number 4.
All right, this is the Fine Arts Specialist. The Curriculum Instruction Department is requesting to move the Fine Arts Specialist from an 11-month to a 12-month position. This is the only specialist position within the core content areas of the Instruction Department to not be full-time. The fiscal impact is less than $12,000, and the job description is attached. Motion to approve the Fine Arts Specialist from 11-month to a 12-month salary.
Have a motion?
I'll move.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Number 5.
Voluntary pre-K grant. Rutherford County Schools has received the fiscal year 21 allocation of funds for voluntary pre-K. We will be funding faculty and staff supplies of 15 voluntary pre-K classrooms. In part with these funds, the grant amount is $1,329,765.87. I also add that 12 of these rooms will be in our annex at John Coleman, space that we recaptured and lightened some and released some of the rooms that, in some of our overcrowded elementary schools. Motion to approve acceptance of the voluntary pre-K grant for the year 2021.
Have a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Number 6.
Approval of the Carl D. Perkins Reserve Grant. Carl D. Perkins Reserve Grant. The Carl D. Perkins Reserve Grant is a competitive grant process that we were awarded $55,000 for regional career pathways work and $35,000 for secondary education work for CTE equipment for the funding period July 1, 2020 through June 30th, 2021 for a total of $90,000. Motion to approve the Carl D. Perkins Reserve Grant for $90,000 to provide for the regional career pathways work and the secondary education work for CTE equipment for the funding period July 1, 2020 through June 30th of 2021.
Motion?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Number 7.
All right, number 7 is Imagine Learning, found on tab 8. The instruction department is requesting to purchase Imagine Learning, an online personalized learning system developed to help students acquire, develop, and strengthen the language skills necessary to fully participate in academic settings and prepare for college and career readiness. The total cost of Imagine Learning for the 2020-2021 school year is $127.50 per student and will be funded through Title I, Title IV, and IDEA funds. Motion to approve the purchase of Imagine Learning for $127.50 per student through Title I, Title IV, and IDEA funds for the 2020-2021 school year.
Have a motion? Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you, ma'am. Questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Number 8.
All right, the next few things that we're going to be going over are being funded through our CARES Act money. So we start off with MobiMax. The instruction department is requesting to purchase MobiMax, an online personalized learning system. MobiMax finds and fixes learning gaps with the power of personalized learning. MobiMax adaptive curriculum creates an individualized education plan for each student, allowing gifted students to progress as quickly as they like, while simultaneously ensuring that remedial students get extra instructions they need. The total cost of MobiMax for the 2020-2021 school year is $27,587 to be funded through the CARES Act. Motion to approve the purchase of MobiMax for $27,587 through the CARES Act for the 2020-2021 school year.
Have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. I'll second it. Any questions?
I do have a question about
Okay.
this and maybe the remaining of them. We might be funding it through the CARES Act this year. But what do
Question.
you plan on for?
Yeah, that's a good one. Go ahead, Dr. Sullivan.
Actually, a lot of these were part of our general purpose budget the last couple years, and that we were able, because they met the CARES Act qualifications, we were able to move them over this year to be able to do that. Some of these, quite frankly, after we see how some of our programs work and where our teacher data is, probably won't be renewed after this year.
Thank you.
Any other questions? A motion is second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
ESGI. The instruction department is requesting to purchase ESGI, a district assessment system for our pre-K through 1 first grade students. ESGI, which stands for Educational Software for Guiding Instruction, is a simple one-on-one assessment solution for pre-K through first grade. ESL, SEL, and SPED, the total cost for ESGI for the 2020-2021 school year is $54,600 to be paid or funded through the CARES Act. Motion to approve the purchase for $54,600 through CARES Act for the 2020-21 school year.
Have a motion?
Move to approve. Second.
Thank you. Questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Go GAT.
All right, COGAT. The instruction department is requesting to purchase COGAT, a district assessment system for our second grade students. The cognitive abilities test is a group administered assessment intended to estimate students' learned reasoning and problem solving abilities through a battery of verbal, quantitative, and nonverbal test items. The cost of the COGAT for the 2020-21 school year is $44,967.60 and will be funded through the CARES Act. Motion to approve the purchase of COGAT for $44,967.60 through the CARES Act for the 2020-2021 school year.
Motion? Move to approve. A second then. Questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Edgenuity. The instruction department is requesting to purchase Edgenuity, an online learning system. Edgenuity offers standards-aligned video-based curriculum for middle and high school blended learning environments. The program allows educators to customize the curriculum for their students who monitor their own progress while completing lessons and assessments and interactive activities. The total cost of Edgenuity for the 2020-21 school year is $130,500 to be funded through the CARES Act. Motion to approve the purchase of Edgenuity for the amount listed through CARES Act for the 2020-21 school year.
Have a motion?
Move to approve.
Thank you. Second? Thank you. Questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Our Edgenuity for the Rutherford County Juvenile Detention Center. The Instruction Department is also requesting to purchase Edgenuity for the Rutherford County Juvenile Detention Center. Edgenuity serves as a basic education program for the Rutherford County Juvenile Detention Center and offers standards-based aligned video-based curriculum for middle and high school blended learning environments. The program allows educators to customize curriculum for their students who monitor their own progress while completing lessons, assessments, and interactive activities. The total cost of Edgenuity for the Rutherford County Juvenile Detention Center for the 2020-21 school year is $21,000 to be funded through the CARES Act. Motion to approve the purchase of Edgenuity for Rutherford County Juvenile Detention Center for $21,000 through the CARES Act for the 2020-21 school year.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Second? Thank you. Questions?
Dr. Sullivan, can we replace this with Kidem?
Yes, we should be able to replace this very easily.
Stuff we can replace with Kidem.
With Edgenuity, that's a lot of our credit recovery for our high schools as well, to where students are getting online, and we are having teachers and this program. So this should be a cost savings for next year.
Good. All right, next is Easy CBM, instruction. I'm sorry.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay.
All right, Easy CBM. The Instruction Department is requesting the purchase of Easy CBM, an online assessment system. Easy CBM is an online system which provides reading and math benchmark progress, monitoring assessments and reports for district, school, and teacher use. This license is $3.50 per student for 30,500 students for a total cost of $106,750 for the 2020-21 school year, and it's funded through the CARES Act. Motion to approve the purchase of Easy CBM for the price listed through the CARES Act for the 2020-21 school year.
Have a motion?
Move to approve.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
All right, Nearpod. The Instruction Department is requesting the purchase of Nearpod, an online student engagement platform. Nearpod is a cross-platform and is easy to use way to engage your students with interactive activities, connect them with a collaborative discussion, and gain instant insight on student learning through formative assessments. The total cost for Nearpod for the 2020-21 school year is $190,655, and it will be funded through the CARES Act. Motion to approve the purchase of Nearpod for the amount listed through the CARES Act for the 2020-21 school year.
Have a motion?
Move to approve.
Thank you. Second? Second. Thank you. Questions? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, BrainPop. The Instruction Department is requesting the purchase of BrainPop, an online student engagement platform. BrainPop is a group of educational websites with over 1,000 short animated movies for students in grades K through 12, together with quizzes, related materials covering the subjects of science, social studies, English, math, engineering, and technology, health, arts, and music. The total cost of BrainPop for the 2020-21 school year is $56,390.40, which was funded through the CARES Act. Motion to approve the purchase of BrainPop at the price listed through CARES Act for the 2020-21 school year.
Have a motion? Move to approve.
Move to approve.
Okay. All in questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
All right, PlayPosit. The instruction department is requesting to purchase PlayPosit, a web-based video platform. PlayPosit is an interactive web-based video platform that allows educators to provide formative assessments both inside and outside the classroom. Data can then be analyzed on an individualized or group level, provide a powerful insight into educational trends in the classroom. The total cost for PlayPosit for the 2020-21 school year is $33,000, and it will be funded through the CARES Act. Motion to approve purchase PlayPosit, the amount listed through CARES Act for the 2020-21 school year.
Have a motion?
So moved.
Chairman, thank you. Second? Questions? Comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
All right, I'm pretty excited about this pre-ACT. I'm glad we're doing this. This next is pre-ACT. The instructional department is requesting to purchase pre-ACT 8-9 for the use in our middle and high schools. This assessment provides educators with 8th grade students an early measure of the college and career readiness while serving as a practice opportunity for the ACT test. The pre-ACT 8 and 9 is scheduled to be given on October the 26th through the 30th in the following time limits. English will be 30 minutes, math 40 minutes, reading 30 minutes, science 30 minutes. The pre-ACT replaces the ACT Aspire that has been used previously. This is a reduction in cost from $25 per student to $13 per student for a total cost of $57,200. This is the total cost savings of $45,300 for the 19-20 school year. Motion to approve the purchase of pre-ACT for $57,200 through the CARES Act for the 2020-21 school year.
Motion?
Move to approve.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Questions, comments?
Saving, it's awesome.
Huh?
Anytime we're saving, that's awesome.
That is good.
I got a question on it. Is this something they can do at home?
They can use the reports to be able to use at home and have access to the platform because they'll get access to the ACT platform. It's also much better aligned to what the actual ACT test will be compared to where ACT Aspire didn't necessarily give us score reports that were really aligned to what ACT would have, even though they were both run by the same company. This is the better version.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Zoom.
Well, plenty of people will be happy about this, Ms. Page. We had a lot of teachers using Zoom when we had our shutdown, and we had some privacy issues, and because we did not actually contract out with them, there was nothing that would prevent us from taking any kind of precautions. So Zoom license, the instruction department is requesting to purchase Zoom, a platform to help our school district's employees bring their teams together in a virtual environment. This is a reliable cloud platform for video, voice content sharing, and chat rooms across mobile devices, desktops, telephones, room systems. The total cost of Zoom for the 2020-21 school year is $50,750, and it will be funded through the CARES Act. Motion to approve the purchase of Zoom for the price listed through the CARES Act for the 2020-21 school year.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Insurance update. Oh, best news I've heard tonight. Director's update.
Yeah, we've heard a lot of things on the instructional department, the kind of money we've saved over this past fiscal year, although we don't hear a lot about that. But tonight we're going to focus on our engineering and construction. We're going to talk a little bit about land in Middle Tennessee and things of that nature. So, Mr. Lee, it's all on you now, brother.
Well, we've had a lot of information tonight, and I'm going to try and not keep you very much longer. You found an additional handout tonight on your table as you came in, and I'm going to make reference to it in just a minute, but In mentioning saving money and things where we're trying to be better and better stewards, one of the things we've implemented this year is a new work order system. Up until this year, when the school sent in a work order, there was actually a piece of paper like a fax machine. It came across, and it actually got placed in a folder, and at the beginning of the next day, each lead would pick up his stack of stuff, and he'd issue out his work orders. And if a work order came in, unless it was an emergency, pretty much it didn't get handed out today. So you may leave with 1 or 2 work orders as a plumber, electrician, and you would get out, and you could potentially get through at the end of the, before the end of the day with nothing left to do, even though there was work orders back at the office that you could pick up. Well, to get those work orders, you had to drive back to Murfreesboro if you were on the north end of the county to get them. Well, we, this past year, purchased all our maintenance guys' iPhones. And we now have a electronic work order system. It was a little painful when we first initiated it, getting it over, but if a new work order comes in, a lead can now look at that work order and distribute it to the appropriate maintenance person. If he's on the other end of the county and he's completed his work, well, guess what? Now he doesn't have to drive back to Murfreesboro to get his work order, and also it doesn't get done tomorrow, it gets done today. So we're saving the taxpayers' dollars riding up and down the road. Our maintenance guys are more efficient. And the other thing it allows us to do with that iPhone, they can now take pictures, create folders. We can begin to track better, as I call them, our problem children, HVAC unit that may continually give us a problem, or a plumbing issue at a certain school that gives us a problem. Those kind of things now we can better track, better isolate, and maybe move things up the list to get on our capital projects list sooner. So that's one thing that we've really done. In conjunction with what Mr. Beaudry talked about, a new time system for the school systems, we're also going to be implementing that in our maintenance department. So that's coming real soon. If you'll refer to the handout I gave you, this is a map of this building. Along with dealing with the COVID issue and all the other lovely things we've been dealing with this spring, we've undertaken better utilization of this building and all of our buildings. As you're aware, which most of you haven't seen, we repurposed the old Smyrna Library, which was Smyrna Middle's library for quite some time, and with the new addition, it became unused. So we've created a North Side PD Center where we can get 150 to 200 people in there to do trainings now. That's already in use. So along with that, it allowed us to begin to reuse this building. We begin to look at because as you all know, we've continued to grow, but this building has not grown. Our staff has grown, but the building does not. So we've looked at every nook and cranny, like the schools have had to when they've grown. They've had to look at putting people in closets. We've had people in closets, and we've tried to figure out a way to get them out of closets. So part of that is the relocation that Mr. Spurlock alluded to a minute ago. And that started with the relocation of adult education down to the John Coleman Annex. And I'll show you that layout in just a minute. But once they moved, it allowed us to move a lot of people that were here across the street. So what this is the names of what it was. And I've circled in highlighted colors and written beside it what it is now. So, Mr. Hodge, the next time you and Mr. Young come through here, Miss Johnson, y'all come to see me, I'm no longer in this building. We've moved across the street. Mr. Everett's no longer in this building. He was a problem child. Mr. Spurlock said he had to go with me. So, he's across the street, too. So, there's been a lot of people that have moved. So, you can see CTE and testing is where we were. Budget and finance is where Title I and federal is. They've moved over to where attendance and nursing was. Attendance has moved down to where transportation is. Health services, nursing, and coordinated school health has moved into instruction. What I didn't do is in instruction, we've added 3 or 4 new offices. So those people in instruction have now moved over with Dr. Sullivan. where he can keep a closer tab on them. They're more under his thumb, kind of like Jason's underneath mine. And our computer lab, we've now used for growth and overflow. Every time we open a new school, we shoehorn a principal and a secretary and somebody trying to figure out how they can build their staff, and they just kind of get stuck in a closet. Well, we now have a place for them, and it's also a growth position for SPED. So the next time you're here and you've got a few minutes, walk around. This area has really changed. If you look at your next page, what you see there is what adult education used to be. That was all their space across the street. So now you see where we all went. Food service, technology, engineering, and construction and transportation. So we've remodeled that area. We're all now across the street. The next page, what you will see is what we've done with John Coleman. When the Head Start program moved out and we re-looked at maximizing all of our space, this is what John Coleman Annex looks like now. The left side is our STEM program. On the right side of that hall is adult education. So we've moved them from here to the north end, which we were seeing a larger growth and larger demographic on that end, so it made better sense for them to be down there. And it really worked out well for us. We could better utilize the John Coleman Annex. On the right side is our 12 pre-K classes that we moved 2 classes each from 6 elementary schools. Now that's 2 classrooms at each school that now got freed up to get somebody out of a closet. And that doesn't mean that that school is completely repaired, but at least we've made help there. We've better utilized our space there. The other thing that we've done is we're also going to move the virtual principal down there, and along with their administrative assistant and their guidance counselor, with the purpose being that we've got some multi-purpose areas down there that they can utilize along with adult ed, possibly along with pre-K. Some of that is still in working out. I have a meeting with Dr. Subicon next week. We're going to look at some things that she would like to see, and we're going to see how we can accommodate those. So,
Lee, there is a, on this left side, there is a computer lab there.
yes, sir. Room 111 is a computer lab at John Coleman Annex. It's also being utilized by adult ed, so they can use it in the evenings. They're using it in the day when we are not going to be using it. Dr. Subicon's admin will be keeping a schedule there. We're going to treat it kind of like a PD room. So if nursing needs to use it, or if, one of the things about the virtual school, if a student is struggling and not getting their grades, they get to come and spend 3 days with Dr. Subicon and her staffs for one-on-one. So we may schedule that room for 2 or 3 days for them. So it becomes a there again, we're utilizing one room for multiple parties in multiple spaces. We're working with them there. One thing with this, we've relocated, we've rewired all of central offices. I don't know if you guys are on RCS tonight. As soon as this is over, I'm killing the server back here tonight, so there'll be, you'll still have access to your email. We'll make that public. It's just not through our public servers. So if you got server at home or on your phone, you'll still get your emails. If you're in RCS, school or whatever, you won't. So you still have access, just not in our facilities that it's not. But anyway, we're taking our servers down. They're the same 2 servers that we've had for the last 15 years. I'm close to 16,000 students in that time, and our servers have not grown. We've been very close to having a problem. So we're expanding those. That's my cue to hurry up. So we're expanding those. That's a shutdown. As soon as we walk out of here, I'm taking my tie off, and Matt, John, and I will be joining the rest of the team, and we're going to shut it down. We'll be here all weekend until we get it back up and running.
One thing about John Coleman Annex, real quick, Trey and I've talked just briefly about to put on your radar as a school board, the adult ed program that we have one agreement for 1 more year. That platform is now actually available completely online. And so depending on what the school board decides, we have the ability to pick up 4 or 5 additional classrooms this time next year as well.
So we're still playing checkers with our rooms, trying to maximize what we got. So I say all that to say this, we've made a lot of strides this year, along with dealing with COVID and doing all these things. We did have other things in the pipeline, and we still made them happen. One thing is kind of a personal, I'm not going to say personal, the Highway 96 property search. That was my first time in this chair looking for property for this school board. I've been on the other side after it's been purchased for the last 13 years, responsible for building the schools and getting them opened on time. So we did some things differently when we were looking for that property. There's been a lot of conversation about the money that we spent testing and vetting that property, and I believe that that money was well spent. I think if we could have worked with the city for a portion of that property, it would have worked for our purposes. But listening to the conversations that were had here, the conversations that were had on in the public, some of the questions, emails that I got, questions that I got asked, there seems to be a lot of misconception on the type of land that's available in Rutherford County. Every piece of property in this county will have some sort of issue. Every developer in this county that develops homes, builds commercial buildings, they go through the same process we did. Maybe a little different. They may not go to the extent that we did, but basically what they're doing is looking to find out, to the best of their ability, what warts does this piece of property have, and how do I address those warts, and what's it going to cost me? And with that knowledge of that cost, does the price per acre that the owner is asking and that infrastructure improvement make my development financially unfeasible for me? In other words, is it too expensive? I'm not going to get a return on my investment. That's what they do, and that's what I do for you. So I say that to say this: every piece of property that has been purchased by the Rutherford County School Board has had some type of wart, some of them smaller than others. That doesn't mean that they were bad pieces of property. It just means it had a condition that we needed to address. Those conditions could be rocks, sinkholes, floodplain, wetlands, cemeteries, streams, depressions. All of these are on any property that we could look at. There's also been properties that we've bought more property than what we actually needed. Some of it usable, and in the future we have either used it or sold it. Some of it unusable that we still own. But there again, that's a decision that is made when you go through the vetting process. As we go forward, we're still looking for property, and if anybody out there is listening, we need property on the west side of Rutherford County, anywhere from 40 to 200 acres. We're interested in looking. If you got it, call us up. I'd love to look at it. We've been asking for, I know I have, for 2 years. And I've had 2 folks call, so we're still looking. But as we go forward, we're still looking for land. That land's going to have some type of wart. Our vetting process is to determine, are the warts too big for us to undertake financially and make it feasible for us to build a school. And I want the public to understand that. There is no perfect land. And 13 years after I've started to work here, the land that was available then, you want to call it the good land, it's not available anymore. It's gone. So there's a possibility that the land we look for now may have a few more warts if it's in the area that we need to be in. And our land is not able to be bought where the prime land is. We have to go where the need is, where the growth is. And in case you haven't looked, the growth is not, there's a lot of growth inside the city limits of Murfreesboro, but the majority of our growth is in the county. And I'll use Blackman as an example. When Blackman Elementary and Blackman High School and Blackman Middle were built, they're in the city limits, but Blackman Elementary is not a city school. Blackman Elementary is a county school. So what does that tell us? That school was built in the county. It's now in the city. So all of these schools were not built in the city limits of Smyrna or in the city limits of Murfreesboro. Most of our schools, they were outside the city limits, and growth has got to us and they've brought us back in. So that's something else we need to look at. I wanted to quickly go over a couple of pieces just to give you an example. There's nothing wrong with these schools. They're safe. There's nothing wrong with the property per se. Some of these properties, we may need to, we didn't go through all the testing that we did now, so we had some issues come up like Rocky Fork Elementary. We had the dirt seam that we didn't know was there because we didn't do the additional testing. So I say all that to say this. Kittrell, fine school out in the country. We've got 88 acres additional out there. And they built, when that land was purchased, it was purchased for 2 schools. Now, the property, the location was good. It was a good buy. I'm not saying we shouldn't have bought the piece of property, but we've got additional acreage at Kittrell that probably when the second school is built, we'll still have some additional property. What that's going to be at that time, that's going to be down the road. So that's a piece like that. When Stewart's Creek was bought, they bought additional land across the road. That was part of that. It was part of the land deal. It was, as we say, all or none. That land now is City of Smyrna land. There was a deal work between the county and the city. The county had some land that the city needed, or vice versa, and it worked out mutually for both folks. They swapped land. Worked out great for everybody. So to buy additional land is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just what happens. Brown's Chapel, we bought a postage stamp, 25 acres, just barely big enough to build the school. Well, there's no sewer out there. We still don't have enough land to have our own sewer, so what did we do? We worked with the developer that was building a development next door to build a sewer system that was funded by the Rutherford County School Board and that developer. Now that's kind of an odd mix, the school board and the developer working together, but the developer had the land. He was also developing and he had need of a sewer. So we determined what our capacity was and what his capacity was, and we split the cost and worked together. So there's an opportunity there, and then once it's done, it's owned by CUD. Oakland Middle School. It's got floodplain issues. It's got a creek on the side of it. We had to build a city road as part of that project, and it sits down in a hole. We have a situation there where we have storm pump systems. The storm water drains to a pond and it cannot get to the creek. In other words, our elevation is lower than the creek elevation. So we pump it to a pond, and then we have we have pumps that literally pump the water back up so that it can go into the creek. Same situation at Whitworth Buchanan Middle School. It is completely flat. There's no elevation there at all, but we have the same situation. We have 2 storm pump systems there because we have to pump from one pond to another pond to get it high enough to get back into the creek. Rockville Middle and High School, 2 or 3 sinkholes when we first bought that. We've got some additional property there, and we've also got a rock quarry out there. That was a rock quarry we created, so it was a benefit to us as we built the school, but now what do you do with that land? So we've got some land there. Laverne Lake, Laverne Middle. We've got numerous sinkholes there. The storm waters go to the sinkholes. We've got additional property. Stewart's Creek Complex, I've already mentioned, we bought some. Rocky Fork Elementary and Middle. Steep topography, big rocks, undeveloped land next to us. We have to deal with their storm water that comes across our property because of the way the land lays, so we had to build a larger detention pond. The the Matthews property out in Walter Hill. There's some wetlands on that property that was not determined when we first bought it. Can we work with it? Probably. There's also some flooding issue with one of the neighbors. Similar, not a whole neighborhood, but one or two homes. The Tan Oaks property, if you'll refer to the next page after that, there's two drawings there. This is a new revelation. I'm bringing it to your attention because this has come up in our application to TDEC for an NOI to get started. A wetland study was not done prior to purchasing that property. There is 11 acres of wetland that we did not know was there when we purchased it. It is there. It is on TDEC's register. So we will be redesigning part of our property there. I still think we can get 3 schools on it. We're just going to have to redesign it right now. So it's best to spend a little more money early if we can, like we did at 96, to find out what all are the issues, and then make an educated decision on whether we purchase it or we don't. I guess that's I'm trying to not point a finger or do anything, and I'm just saying these are examples. We were able to work with some we bought extra land, so there is no one size fits all. So I guess I'm asking everybody kind of keep an open mind when we go to these next few pieces. And I do think we as a group are better educated now. We are doing more testing, and I think that testing is in the benefit to us as a system and also the taxpayers.
Sum it all up, though, the land topography in Middle Tennessee there's no perfect, especially Rutherford County.
That's exactly what I'm in a long roundabout way, that's exactly what I'm saying.
You wasted 20 minutes of our time.
Yes, sir, I did. And I promised I wasn't going to do it, but I did.
I have a few questions for you.
Yes, ma'am.
When it comes to purchasing the property, what is the largest acreage left over or unusable land? Do you know? Can you tell us? After we've utilized the land for what we needed to do, how much
Sitting today, because I would say Kittrell, but I know Kittrell eventually was purchased as a 2-school site. So if you built a high school, which is probably less likely than a middle school because of its proximity to Oakland and Siegel now, I would say it would be a middle school. So you got 88 acres, so we would probably use another 40, so we could have 40 left. So that being the case, the answer would not be Siegel. It would be Rockvale.
Which is?
52 or 3.
We paid the same price for every acre.
Yes, ma'am. It's a buy it, here's the price, buy it all. Now, sometimes they'll come down a little bit across the board and list it, and instead of 25, it may be 23, because they know there's something there. But that's a decision there. And you bring up Rockvale, we ran sewer for 3 miles back to WT's Market. It's gravity sewer that now belongs to the city of Murfreesboro.
Will any of those developments that are building out there be able to tie into it?
Yes, ma'am, every one of them.
So essentially everything that we just went through on the 96 property and the big arguments that we're
yes, you're exactly correct.
So
except
that was brought up is now essentially.
Except for the 96 property would have been a private sewer.
What year did we buy the Rockville property?
That was the second school that I built. I've been here 13 years, so I'm going to do my math. That was 2007, so it'd been 2008, 2009, somewhere in there.
Thank you. I have another question on the other part of what you were saying, if you're finished with that.
Okay.
When was the last time that central office buildings were renovated or people were moved around? and more specifically, what was the population of our students?
The answer to that question is these are the original walls. For the most part, this is it. This is the first time.
This was built in
97, I want to say. I can look on the plaque, it's outside. John can look on the plaque and tell us. I think it's 97.
Dr. Ragsdale was the
Yes.
first director of schools here, so it would be when we.
97, I'm correct.
And there's been no renovations?
No, ma'am. And in case you didn't notice tonight, you have a new technology system, new screens, new cameras. Next week, when you have your next meeting, I promise Mr. Estes, there's going to be a big clock up there in that black space. When we get this cabling this weekend, you'll get your clock. But we've upgraded all of this at the same time. This is the only 2-week window we had in the schedule. So we've had this schedule. We've renovated all this.
I know there's a lot of questions, particularly now in the financial hardship we find ourselves in and that we're going to be in. There's questions about the way that we're spending, and there's misunderstandings about our budgets. And so it's hard to justify, not that I disagree at all, because I fully support what you've done and what we're doing every day, but it's hard to justify spending money for renovations when we have, as you very well know, all the issues we have with deferred maintenance on our major facilities. Not that I disagree, but I just would like to understand and let the public understand really what are we working with. So in 97, what was our student body?
Probably 19,000 or
19 or 20,000. Yep.
40,000 students more, and we're finally making some renovations, which to me.
The other thing is we did this all out of our general fund. It's not out of capital projects. There was no additional funding other than $150,000 last year for the PD Center in Smyrna.
Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate the effort.
And if you will clear this up for me, at no time have we taken money out of our capital maintenance fund to buy software.
Can't do that.
That's right. Thank you.
Can't do that. It's against state law.
That's it. Ms. Johnson, Tennessee legislator.
Well, the only thing I had was referring back to the special session that they're calling about to revisit the liability issues. I spoke to Representative Rudd earlier in the week. He indicated that the House was very eager to get back and get some things in place. And again, talking to Senator Reeves this afternoon, he indicated the same thing. So I'm confident, although those are only 2 of our legislative delegation members, I'm confident that hopefully we have the support from our delegation to move forward. Whether it passes or we get anywhere with it, it would make me comfortable to have a little bit more liability support as we move forward in our school year. But other than that, and I don't mean to step on Ms. Sharp's toes here, but the president held a panel, which many of our legislators are currently there in DC, and Middle Tennessee was very well represented. Dr. McPhee was there. We had an MTSU student, so I was impressed to see that Tennessee was well represented at that conversation. So, but that's it.
Thank you. Federal, Ms. Sharp.
Well, I'll keep it short. Mr. Voss has been involved in some loan forgiveness suits, and then she's also said today that they're talking about those schools like us that are going to open up and maybe having some more federal funds. So one thing, Ms. Johnson, that I thought about, because someone brought it up, was if they do have a special session, would it be worth us lobbying our legislators to see? I know there's no money, but we really do need 1 nurse per school.
If I'm not mistaken, and I could be wrong here, special sessions are generally called for a specific purpose, and they stick to that business.
So they have to call another one?
That anything outside of that, now I could be wrong, but anything outside of that would have to be done during the regular session.
Mr. Spurlock, how many nurses are we short to have a nurse at every school?
You got a nurse adult. It's not that. The funding mechanism is the local picks up. I think the BEP only funds about 17 of those 40-something nurses we have. That's the issue there.
Unfunded mandates.
Yeah, another unfunded mandate. Okay. Thank you. That's all. This is going to be short.
If I might add, Mr. Chairman, to what Ms. Sharp is saying, I found it interesting this morning when DeVos mentioned that for the schools that don't return, she kind of left that door wide open for extending the voucher program. I felt that we need to I'm not going to quote her exactly, but that we need to look at other ways to get money into the parents' hands so they can make other decisions if their schools are choosing something that the parents don't want. So I thought that was some interesting language that she used today. But
Any opportunity, yeah.
of course.
Didn't the president and vice president both at least lightly threaten to take away funds to any school that did not open?
Yesterday, but then today I saw where Mr. Voss was talking about giving an additional funds for those that did open. So it's all been out there. So it's one of those wait and see.
Okay, general discussion?
You're going to think I talked to Mr. Lee. I did not talk to Mr. Lee about this. I hesitate to even say too much, but we did have a town hall meeting, forum, if you want to call it that, and the NAACP helped put it on with Zion Christian and Carrie Marable, a county employee, I might add, moderated it, and I thought that our three candidates that are sitting right up here, I thought they did a really, I don't know what to say, excellent job, I guess. I guess I'll say that. I came away and I enjoyed it, and it was very well, the whole thing was very well done. Now, I'm going to say three things that I did notice. And one, I noticed Mr. Young's comment that we had $85 million worth of repairs to do, and we got $7.5 million to do that $85 million. And that went nowhere. Nobody commented, I don't believe, or said very much about it at all. And that is probably, I guess, maybe the most serious problem that we've got, and it's not going to go away. A couple other things I heard, and Mr. Lee was kind of talking about it here just a little bit, and that is about land and schools, and that sort of thing. And there was, and I tell you what, if you're going to run for public office, I think you ought to do your homework. I think that would be a really good idea. And there's a reason that there's not a middle school at Riverdale High School, where I was for 11 years, I might add. And there's a reason, but you have to go back to the 1970s and 80s to find out what that was. And I might point out, at that time, Rockvale went to the 8th grade. There was no middle school. Christiana went to the 8th grade. There was no middle school. Buchanan went to the 8th grade. There was no middle school. And I've saved the best for last. The legendary Barfield Braves, that's a good one, they went to the 8th grade. So there was no middle school that was actually needed.
Reading out list, yes.
And we had 1,420 students in a two-year-old school.
Thank you, Ms. Good. And also there was a question in there during the evening, and I forget who, and I forget how it was addressed, so forgive me. But that what we really needed, and I hadn't heard this in a good while, what we really needed was a middle school in the downtown area between Northfield and Broad Street. That's what we really needed. And, okay, all right, if that's what you want to do. But I got to thinking later on that night, first of all, there's not 50 acres. There's not 40 acres unless you want to get a bulldozer and just bulldoze a block or buy it from MTSU, which wouldn't be for sale, of course. But also, I don't know where that land actually is. I don't think it exists. But you can comment on that if you want to. But I want to thank those people for putting on a pretty good forum out there. I thought they did a good job. I thought it was very informative. Both the city council candidates were there, and our candidates were there, and I appreciated them.
Okay, anyone else?
Just a real quick question, I guess probably for Dr. Anthony, and I should remember these numbers, but they don't have to be exact, but off the top of your head, how many employees does the system employ right now?
Okay, certified is 3,462, 3,462. Yes. Sorry, math person.
Certified though, are we?
We're talking about teachers and administrators, anybody that has the degree.
How many of those 3,462 are teachers?
All but 179.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
It is.
Anyone else? Thank everyone for a good meeting.
Mr. Chairman, the 21st meeting, did y'all decide if you want to do it before the other meeting or after? Just give us some direction. You can do like a 4 o'clock meeting or?
Why don't we do it on the end? That'd suit everybody better. Got that? Okay. Nothing else. We're adjourned.
Judy?